This time I would ask everyone either turn off or silence their cell phones so as not to disrupt today's proceedings. The procedure will be to introduce the case record as the Codes Department has it on the wall here by means of a PowerPoint presentation. We'll present any letters in support or opposition to particular cases today, as well as any correspondence from other Metro agencies. At the conclusion of our presentation, the applicant will come forward first, along with any persons in support for their case. After the applicant speaks, the opposition can come forward if there's any present. And then after the opposition speaks, the applicant will have a period for rebuttal. The board in their rules provide cases without opposition 10 minutes to present their case to the board. In a contested case, that are cases with opposition, the board provides 15 minutes for each side of a case. Again, that's per side, not per person. So if there are multiple speakers, please divide your time accordingly before you come up here. All sections I refer to today come directly from Title 17 of the Metro Code of Law, which is the Metropolitan Zoning Ordinance. And I'll dispense from reading individual sections unless the applicant or opposition requests that they be read. I also hereby introduce and make part of the record the entire zoning code. The zoning code requires that this proceedings be taped. Therefore, it's imperative anyone wishing to address this board, please come forward, identify yourself here at the table, and make your presentation. It should be noted that it's found that anyone's presented false or misleading testimony to this board that may have affected the board's decision. Any approval may be revoked at a later date by means of a show cause hearing. The board will go through all cases set for public hearing today, and after each case, the board will then discuss and then vote on your case. The board is vested to act with the power to act on these cases as outlined in Section 1740-180 of the Metro Code of Law. And the code also requires that 4 members of our 7-member board be present to constitute a quorum. The code also requires 4 affirmative votes to grant or deny your application. In the event that only 4 members hear your case, you must have all 4 votes in the affirmative. If not, your case is reset for the next available public hearing, which at this time is November 7th. If 5 or more members hear your case or participate and you fail to receive 4 votes today, your case will stay on our agenda for the next 30 days, however many meetings we have in the next 30 days, which I believe will just be 1. The members who participate in the case are allowed to change their vote. The members who did not participate may watch today's hearings on our YouTube channel and review the paper record and become eligible to participate at the next agenda. If after 30 days no one's changed their vote and you do not have the 4th affirmative vote, your case is deemed denied by operation of law. The applicant or any aggrieved property owner may request a rehearing within 60 days of this public hearing. Further, any applicant or aggrieved property owner may appeal this board's decision to Chancery or Circuit Court within the same 60-day period, but once that 60 days has elapsed, the board's decision is final. If you're an applicant and your case is granted, it is necessary for you to obtain the permit for which you've applied. You have 2 years from today's date to pick up your permit for this board's approval to remain valid. If you fail to pick up your permit within 2 years after today, you have to come back and seek reapproval. Mr. Chairman, I submit that all cases were filed in proper order. Applicants were notified by certified mail as required by the zoning code. All affected property owners within 300 feet were notified by first-class mail, and a legal ad was published in the Tennessean. Before I begin with the consent agenda and preliminary announcements, are there any elected officials present who wish to address this board? Okay, Mr. Chairman, seeing none. Preliminary announcements. I have but one in the middle of page 3, the Metropolitan Government's request for the new library at 720 Ball Road. They have withdrawn the variances in setback and landscape buffer yard. They have submitted a plan that complies with both of those items. So it's just a special exception for you today. And that's the only preliminary announcements I have. The board does have a consent agenda, and a board member reviews the record in each case, and prior to the hearing, if in their opinion the applicant meets the criteria for the application they've requested and they feel that testimony would not alter the material facts, they recommend the case to the remainder of the board for approval. We'll enter into the record those cases that have been recommended by Chairman Whitson. And if there's anyone here opposed to the case numbers that I call, if you'll please raise your hand. identify yourself, and we'll remove the case from consent and hear it in its regular order on the agenda. The first case recommended for the consent agenda is case 2013-95 at the top of page 2. Ed Meek, the appellant at 1223 RD Avenue, requesting variance in street setback to construct a new residence. Is there anyone here in opposition or have questions on case 95? Mr. Chairman, seeing none, this case is recommended for consent based upon the hardship of the stormwater buffers that bisect the property and pretty much create only one spot for this home to be built. The setback variance is triggered by the adjoining house sitting so far away off the property line it skews the average of the homes to either side. The next case recommended for consent, case 2013-96, middle of page 2, Sharon Piggott, the appellant, Elizabeth and Brian Kagi. I hope I pronounced your name properly. People butcher my name all the time. So a variance in side setback to construct an attached garage to the home. So anyone here in opposition to case 96 present? Mr. Chairman, seeing none, the hardship in this case are mature trees that would have to be removed from the property were they to construct this garage in conformance with the setback. With that, you recommend that case for consent. Third case on today's consent agenda is at the top of page 3. Is case 2013-98, St. Mina Coptic Orthodox Church at 476 McMurray Drive, requesting a special exception and a variance in side setback to install 2 portable classrooms for St. Mina's Sunday School. Is there anyone here in opposition to case 98 present? Mr. Chairman, seeing none, this is the church has actually purchased some adjoining property for Metro and will be moving 2 portables onto that property. Property is going to get consolidated all into this parcel. And the variance hardship there is the stormwater drainage ditch is necessitating a need for a variance in that case. And finally, the last case recommended for consent, case 2013-99, the Metropolitan Government at 720 Ball Road, and they are requesting only a special exception now to construct a new public library. Is there anyone here in opposition to case 99 or have questions? Mr. Chairman, seeing none, those are the 4 cases recommended by you on a motion to the remaining members of the board.
Okay, so we have a motion to pass the consent agenda. Is there a second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Passes. Personal apology. I had a work emergency come up right before this, so I'm going to leave now. And the only reason I drove down was so that the consent agenda would pass since I had reviewed it. So anyway.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you. All right. Bye-bye, everybody.
Who seconded the agenda? I did. Thank you.
And thank you to Council Lady Blaylock for being here on her case too.
Well, Council Lady, you could have spoke if you'd like to. All right, thanks. I would like to remind those folks who sit at the very back of the room, your cases are automatically denied, so please come forward. I'm just kidding. Everyone sits in the back of the room here. Makes for bad TV. But so cases 95, 96, 98, and 99 have been approved, and we'll begin with the first case, which was on the front page, page 1, case 2013-86, the Greater Love Assembly Baptist Church. The applicant's here present. Please come forward. Is there opposition present for case 86? Okay. Seeing that, this was deferred from the, I believe, September 5th hearing to provide the applicants more time to rework their plan. They have submitted to our office a revised floor plan, which eliminates a sizable portion of the seating in the sanctuary area that also further reduces their parking requirements. So their new plan, which I'll put on the screen, although I don't want you to be shocked, it looks exactly the same. The footprint has not changed, but the interior has. So the parking requirement's been reduced down to 6 spaces required, which they do conform with.
So all they're doing is asking for a special exception
It's a special
today?
exception, yes, sir. And let me put those up, and I'll turn it over to you guys to talk to the board.
Good morning. Introduce yourself and proceed with your case.
Good morning. I'm Marilyn McLean. Good afternoon. Marilyn McLean. And
James McLean, member.
And we've returned as to request that the resubmitted plan be approved for the property at 1905 Formosa Street for the construction of the church, with the building size being the 40 by 60 building size. And we did meet with the church members and reduce the seating size to 52, which would be accommodated by the full lot size of 11,250 square feet, and which would also allow for the 6 parking spaces that would be required.
There were some comments by the Planning Commission, I believe, on this. Did you address those? Like running the building closer to the street? Am I on the right?
Yes.
And are you addressing that as well?
Yes, we are.
Okay. Any questions?
How are you addressing the street? I mean, what I see is you're still accessing it from Formosa, and didn't they ask that you could access it from the alley?
It would be both way. We would have, instead of having a two-way entrance and exit, it would be one way.
Okay.
And David, the building code's going to require them to have handicap access from Formosa.
Okay.
So they're going to have a ramp up there.
So I mean, the Planning Commission had suggested that they not have any entrance, I think.
Yes.
And so, but that, the code doesn't allow that because
Right.
of
Our building code will not permit that to happen.
Okay. Great.
Any other questions, comments?
We appreciate you coming back and working with our staff. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay. Have anything else to add?
Just thank you.
Okay. With that, we'll close the public hearing and open for discussion.
I think the last time we were all on board with the special exception, it was just the what was the size, and would we consider any other parking or any other variances, and those aren't being requested today. So I think the special exception makes sense.
Entertain a motion.
I'll move that the board approve the special exception use permit. The board finds that all of the requirements of MCL 17.16.150 have been met.
I'll second that.
Okay, the motion been made and seconded. Any further discussion? All in favor of the motion, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? So moved, passed. Okay, thank you.
Good luck, and thank you for fixing up old family land that's been the family. How long has it been the family?
Oh, about 80 years.
Great. Good luck with that.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Good luck. Thank you.
Thank you. All case 86 is approved on a vote of 6-0. The first case in today's public hearing will be, and as I call your case number, if the applicants please come forward. This is case 2013-97. Mr. Thomas Petty, the appellant and owner of the property at 625 Neely's Bend Road, requesting variances in the maximum allowed accessory building square footage size. I'll explain that in just a moment. And side setback in RS10 to allow the construction of a new 14 by 26 carport and keep the existing 12 by 26 garage. Referred to the board under section 17-12-050. The applicant has alleged the board would have jurisdiction under section 1740-180 item B. Are there any parties present in opposition to case 97? Okay, seeing none. Stephanie, if you'll reset the clock 10 minutes. Mr. Petty, let me go through some photographs and such and explain to them why you're before us, and then I'll turn it over to you to speak. Mr. Petty's property is located on the north side of Neely's Bend Road in Madison between Idlewild and House Avenues.
Yes, sir.
This is the subject property's aerial. Our aerials, we had expected to have some new ones by now. These are a little dated, as you'll see on forward, but I'd like to bring you at least something. This is Mr. Petty's property on Neely's Bend, and the nature of the request is twofold. There's homes to either side. I'll leave this photograph up because the council passed a restriction about 9 years ago that limited the amount of outbuildings, accessory buildings that one can own on a property based on a ratio of 50% of the footprint of your house. Because before then, we were having detached garages being built that exceeded the size of the principal residence. So the council sought to restrict that, and they passed an ordinance that said basically that outbuildings, detached structures, cannot exceed more than 50% of the floor area of the home. Mr. Petty's got available to him up to 700 square feet. So they created this floor, and they said 50% of the footprint of the residence or 700, whichever is greater. And in his case, the 700 square feet is what's permitted. The building which you see here is an existing outbuilding that's been on the property for some time. Our office issued a permit to Mr. Petty to, sorry, I should have that right in front of me. We issued a permit earlier this year to construct the 25 by 24 building, which you see here. My cursor's heading on, with the intent to remove this structure from the property. That would keep him in compliance. Mr. Petty, we issued the permit. He returned back to us in mid-August or so and talked to the examiner that issued his permit to find out how he could be allowed to leave that structure, and so that brings forth his appeal. As part of that discussion, too, he also wanted to put a carport up over this new concrete area. Is that right, Mr. Petty? Right in front of the new garage?
Well, at a much later date now, but I want to put one somewhere, but
All right.
not particularly there.
I got you.
See, you can't tell. You can't tell, but it is like a ramp, and there's almost over a foot's difference from the base down here to up there where the garage is. That's just the way the concrete guy put it in there.
So Mr. Petty came to see us, find out what would be the process of asking to keep the structure and construct this. With the total of all three structures, counting the carport at a later date, this garage that we issued a permit and the existing, he would be at 1,276 square feet in total. So he's 576 over the allowable 700. So that would be his variance.
I'm not sure about that. I thought I was allowed 7, and the new building is 6. That's
Right.
25 by 24, and this other building here is only 3 something. So I guess I'm a little, maybe my math ain't very good, but I thought it was about 200 and something over.
Yeah, I got 888.
Joey's counting the carport as well.
And the carport as well comes into this
Oh,
discussion.
if you build the carport?
Yes.
Well, see, the existing carport, when I bought the house, was falling down. And the place was pretty bad. I put, in the old building, I put about $3,700 in it with a new roof, new gutters around it, and of course, in order to do them, I had the baseboard for them to sit on had to be replaced, and a window to the back had to be fixed and replaced, and there were some bad pieces in this siding or the wood board, and I replaced that, plus hinges on the front doors to swing open, and I had it painted. So I got some money in it, but and I also need the storage very bad. And if I have to go off the property and I have to tear that down, I know that's not an excuse that y'all want to hear, but it's going to cost me probably about $2,800 to $3,200 to have a commercial dumpster come in and then the thing be tore down and hauled away. Plus, I'm going to have to go off my property to rent a storage place because it's filled up with stuff from my other house that I used to have up in Ohio. So even though those are not, from the way I understood reading the thing, it's not really y'all's concern. They're definitely mine.
For the record, will you introduce yourself? I don't think that got put on the record, did it?
Oh, Thomas Petty, P-T-T-Y.
So you do want to build the carport for sure, or
No, I'd like to, but not necessarily there, down close to the house, but that comes at a different time and probably wouldn't be able to. I think he thought, I don't know what he thought, but see that new foundation and that ramp is built on top. It's set for about 4.5 foot going down through there where the other building is. So you couldn't put a carport there. You'd have to put it across the drive. And
so would it still be? Would it be attached to your house if you built a carport, or?
No. It would be some small little carport so I can park my car close to the house.
I'm confused about this carport. Joey, this isn't a variance asking for potential future carport, is it? Are we just talking about?
I think we're just talking about the building. I don't really want to build, nor can I afford to build a carport, even a small carport, for probably at least 3-4 years.
All right, well, this
But I
appeal,
mean, the appeal says it's to build a carport and keep the existing garage. So would these be two separate issues that we address?
I mean, they would all come into play because the existing, the carport that's coming in at 364 only pushes him at 1,200. He's still over with what's out there, just those two structures that you see.
So
Right, but I'm just saying if we were to talk about this and say, you know what,
Come back later and find.
well, you have 888 square feet enclosed right now. If we chose to say that's okay over the 700, that's a variance on the. It basically is a variance on the existing garage, but we would not address the carport and say if you wanted a carport, you'd have to come back with a specific plan.
You can do that, yes, sir.
Okay, so that's what I'm saying. It could be looked at as two
It could be
separate
looked at.
things. Okay.
and does it matter if the carport's attached or not to the house?
It does. If it's an attached carport to the resident structure itself, is
No, absolutely not.
yeah. He doesn't want to attach it. So for us,
Okay, well,
it
I'm
would
just
be-
saying that you wouldn't need a variance.
you would,
You would?
yes, because he'd be over the 888.
So why does it make a difference?
Well, that's why the examiner captioned the carport in this appeal all at once, to deal with it all at one time.
Yeah, but I'm saying hypothetically, if the carport were attached, you still count it as an accessory?
No, the attached carport doesn't count.
Yeah,
Right.
I think,
So for future reference, if it were attached to the house, he wouldn't have to come back for an appeal? Okay.
Assuming he meets all other setbacks and whatnot.
So basically, all we are really addressing right now is just this building and not a carport. If he says 3 or 4 years, he's not even going to get a permit. We don't even need to be including that in this discussion, do we?
If that's his intent not to build it for beyond 2 years, then certainly that'd be off the table.
To have
when
him
we'd be
come
dealing
back
with
for that
examiner.
when he's ready, okay.
I think the codes man thought I wanted to make the old structure whole again with the carport where it used to be, and I don't want to do that. But he must have got that idea. I don't think I gave him that idea, but I think that's what's going on there.
Yeah, the only question I have, I mean, when Joey had presented the case, he'd said that when you came and asked for the permit for the existing, the new garage, that the intent was to tear down the old one, and I guess why did that intent change?
Well, no, that wasn't my intent. The intent was that he told me I'd have to tear down the old structure before I built the garage. And that old structure is filled so that you can't hardly get through there from the stuff from my other house. I've lived in the house now for about 7.5 years. And my house is too small and I've got my stuff stored in there. It's all the way to the ceiling. So if I had to tear that down first, all my stuff would be sitting out in the yard until I had it built. And that was, according to the people I went through, that wasn't going to be for another, I didn't know it at the time, but it ended up being another 2.5 months before it was actually built, and or whatever. It was quite a bit of time. So all my stuff would have been sitting outside. I got brand new stuff that's never even been taken out of the box, lathes and all kinds of stuff. Some pretty expensive stuff. It's never even been out of the carton. So he said, well, leave it. You can leave it up until the place, until it's up and finished. And I said, well, I'd sure like to keep that. I told him why. He says, well, you can ask for permission to keep it. But he says, at the very best, it was only if your neighbors didn't object or nobody objected. He told me right then that it was only a 50% chance. So, that's where I'm at as far as our discussion.
So let me get some clarity, just to make sure I understand. We're looking about 200 square feet right now. He's over without a carport inclusive, so he's just over.
212.
All right. That's helpful. Thank you.
So we really need a hardship, don't we? Can you give us a hardship reason that you?
It's a hardship to me. I mean, it really is.
But it can't just be a financial hardship. It has to be.
I understand that. But it is financial because it is the money. I can't think of another reason other than the fact that all my stuff's in there. I got to find another place for it. Now, I can put some of it in the garage, but the whole purpose of building the garage was to house my truck and my car and my riding lawnmower, which I'm going to have to leave outside in order to put everything in there. Or I might be able to get my riding lawnmower in there, or maybe a car. That would be about it.
Well, we can do that in discussion.
So you can't think of a hardship reason other than financial to keep that
the fact that my stuff's in that building, if I tear it down, I'm going to have to go to outside storage to rent. And the price of having it tore down and the fact of the $30-something $100 I've got in the structure, it's 55 to 65 years old. And I was hoping for that reason I could keep it, but maybe not.
So what was your purpose of the garage? You going to park a car in that? Or?
My truck and car and my riding lawnmower in the overflow so I can finally get through that building. See, you got to turn sideways and manipulate yourself. It's so stacked with containers and boxes. It's completely packed.
So then what will you need the carport for?
I was thinking about putting in a carport, but that was not even, I wasn't even thinking that far advanced. Like I said, I think the codes guy thought I wanted, see, there's a pad where a carport used to be. Well, that's more than 2/3 of it's covered up with this ramp foundation that they built for the garage. And so that wouldn't even be practical. I'd have to build across the ramp. And I really don't want to do that. If I built one, it would be small. It'd be down more towards the house. But I wasn't even that's later on because I don't even have the money to do that.
I'm personally sympathetic with your needs and your logic, but for me to good conscience to vote yes for a variance, I'd need some sort of hardship other than financial by the rules that.
Well, it's not. It's financial gain is not the only basis is what's required. Financial hardship is, I think. Joey, tell me if I'm wrong. Is that not a legitimate?
No, it's not. According to what I read, I know that.
Well, but it's not about gain. This is not a gain.
No, it has nothing to do with gain.
Huh? His situation is not about gaining any money. He still have to spend. Is that?
Right, but under your hardship standards, which letter D, the financial gain is not the only sole basis for granting the variance.
Right, but do you consider the fact that he's going to have to spend money as a gain? I think that's a loss.
That's for you six to decide.
Okay, I mean, I'm just asking the question. Okay. Is there opposition to this case?
There's no one present.
Okay.
I think, Mr. Petty, as far as the fact pattern, we might differ a little bit on how we got here. But long and short of it, we do and have typically allowed folks to keep the structure while that one's under construction and then let them move the things. And then as part of the CO of closing out that permit, hey, this structure's got to get removed. And I think that's what happened. We reached that point with him, and he's like, I don't want to take it down.
So there's not he doesn't have a certificate of occupancy?
No, there's not a final on this building.
Okay.
Because we're over on square.
So you're right. The codes department recollection is that it was, I'm going to replace my garage. I'm building a new garage. I want to keep the old garage while I'm building the new garage. When I get the new garage done, I can transfer all my stuff or whatever, and the old garage comes down.
Yeah, I wasn't privy to the examiner in his conversation, but my examiner would have explained that, look, you have this limitation on size of outbuildings. So,
And that's pretty much what I heard. I think
that's what he said as well.
Yeah, that's what I was saying. That's the only thing I knew. And the fact that I was going to keep it because, if I don't keep it, I'm going to have to, instead of putting my truck and my car in there, put everything in there, or either if I keep the building to put my truck in my car, my lawnmower, I've got to go outside to a commercial place to rent one.
But you did build the new garage with the impression that you would have to take down the old garage.
Yes, but I could challenge it.
Okay.
But he told me it would only be a 50-50 if nobody.
Right. So that's helpful to know. So you need this going in, that you would come in and say, hey, I'm going to give it a shot, and hopefully you get to keep my old garage.
I was hoping, yeah.
Okay.
Mr. Petty, did any of your neighbors, have any of them suggested that you needed to take the structure down?
Not to me, but there's only two neighbors that I don't know anybody over there, but everybody pretty much keeps to themselves. The people on, if you're looking towards the building, people on my right side facing that building right there, they've been there for like 50, 60 years. And he said he didn't care, and supposedly y'all sent him a letter. And the guy over on this side, who is a nice guy, but he told me he didn't care. But I won't go there. But nevertheless, both of them told me they didn't care. But what people tell you and what they actually do, you don't ever know. So I don't know. I don't know what they did. Whether y'all contact them with a phone or a letter or in person, I don't know what they told you, but that's what they told me.
But as a practical matter, your lot may not be big enough to build one structure, so you're just simply trying to do in two structures, correct? You just need both of the structures to have sufficient room to store these items.
I do.
Right?
I do, definitely.
Joy, if those two are connected, does that make any bearing on it?
No, sir, it doesn't. You'd have to connect the structures to the residence with a completely enclosed roof, wall, floor. That was Ms. Jones's question to me there, actually, was about, whether or not, if they're connected to each other, it doesn't matter. It's all one structure.
Sympathetic, and I think we have to be cautious as to how we tread here, that we don't potentially open up a Pandora's box that somebody else comes along and says, well, I want to do this, and play a game of, I want to keep this until then, and then suddenly we're faced with, well, we let you do it, why don't we let everybody do it? We try to be fair.
I understand that, and that's the thing that you can do. So, I knew going in this that my very, very chances were 50-50. I don't want to tear it down, but I got to abide by the law, and which I'll decide here today, and that's all it is to it. I don't have a choice.
How wide is your lot?
I got the dimensions here. I think it's 100 and almost 160 foot.
Do we have any more questions, or is it?
No, he's trying to find something, but,
It says 50 feet.
oh, okay.
Yeah, it says 50 feet wide, and then it's 126 from the back property line to the house, and then it'd be from the house to the street
I'm sorry.
would be the,
That's 30, 40, 50. It's about 60 foot wide. That's all it is. It's 100 something from the front to the back. So it's only 60 or 60 something feet. That's it.
Okay.
Yeah.
You have anything else to add?
Wish I did, but I don't.
Any questions? We'll close the public hearing and discuss the case. All right. Discussions. I think 50-foot lot is a narrow lot, you know. We've given hardships on narrow lots, but
and I guess the only thing, I mean, you know, when I think about it, I was like, you know, when you want to do something, you go in and you negotiate with the codes department and you say, can I do it or can I not? And they say, well, yeah, you can, and here's the parameters. And you say, well, I want to keep this, and I know I'm going to tear it down later. And then when you do what you've negotiated, and you come back later and say, oh, no, I don't think I want to tear it down, there's something about that seems like not right, even though I don't have a real personal issue with that structure. It just is outside of codes, and it's outside of what you said you were going to do. So that's the way I'm kind of looking at it. I think if it had been a situation where came to us early and said, I need 800 square feet, and here's why, and here's what the plan's going to be, and here's how it's all going to be connected. So maybe I'm caught up on the process and not necessarily the outcome, but I do think that with all parties fully aware of the process and it's what you've agreed to, it seems a little odd to come back at the end of the game and say, you know what, I really didn't want to agree to it, and so now I want to get something that's going to advantage me.
Mr. Taylor.
Sure. Mr. Petty. Mr. Petty? I can't. The hearing's closer.
Hello?
No, Mr. Petty.
Sir,
Yeah, and I mean, it's close, and I don't mean that to be disrespectful or anything.
No, I understand, but the codes man knew my intentions from the very beginning. I didn't want to say that. He told me that I would.
Okay.
And he says, well.
unfortunately, we've cut off, we've stopped.
Yeah, we can't have it, but I understand that,
discussion,
and I understand that that's what it meant, so.
Positions, David, do you have anything to add? Questions? Points of view?
I agree with you. It's a narrow lot, and, you know, to me, there's no opposition. I mean, I'm not terribly opposed to, you know, giving this variance. I understand what he said, but as Joey can vouch for in the codes department, we have people all the time that say they're going to do something or do it like this or submit something, and it just doesn't happen. And so sometimes we're dealing with what's in front of us, and that's why he's here, and he gets to make his final pitch to us, and we get to decide.
Cynthia?
I agree. I think it's a narrow lot. I understood Mr. Petty to say that he knew that he thought he would challenge it down the road, and I'm comfortable with the amount of space that we're looking at, and it may prevent him from building a carport. I mean, it may be something that prevents additional construction for which he would not need a variance. And there being no opposition, I would be inclined to let him keep it. In addition to the fact that he has put money into it, he's painted it, it looks appropriate for the neighborhood.
Well, I'm encouraged by the fact that he did get a permit. We see a lot of these that they don't. We come in and ask for forgiveness. So, you know, so this is a pleasant change from that.
Well, and I will say on that, in that regard, I have a lot of respect for Mr. Petty for doing that, because we have seen where people just build something, come in and ask for forgiveness, and that's a whole lot harder to say, well, I just got to tear it down, because, you know, and we have been accepting of some of those situations that seem to make sense, the forgiveness piece. So I get that.
I think I'm straddling the fence here, so I guess maybe I need to feel a little bit better about a couple things. One is looking at our job in upholding the code and the process of knowing this is what he was supposed to do in order to get the approval to proceed. If he needed that, should he have made his other one bigger? There's a lot of elements here that I think from a code perspective is our responsibility to protect that code, but this is why we're here, is there are moments that there are conditions or something that makes sense and they need to be here to ask those questions. So on the flip side, 200 square feet does not bother me. I can see where the space would be helpful. I think there's some, much bigger issues there as far as if you tear it down, well, it doesn't look right from where it's sitting right now. I'm looking at the drawing, or looking at the photos. So I see both sides of this, and I know that's why we're here. So I don't have any heartburn about supporting this, but I do have some heartburn about establishing a precedent that we somehow forgive people that don't do what they're supposed to all the time.
We've done lots of cases where someone comes up and, as we said, without a permit. I appreciate personally his openness and honestness, that you get people sometimes that come here after the fact and you could just tell they're just trying to say something that's in their best interest. I think he just truly told us what happened and what he wants. And, I don't have a problem with what he wants. It's a narrow lot. And like I said, I would support a variance.
You want to make a motion?
Yes. I will make a motion that we approve case 097 and allow the variance for the accessory building as it, and the hardship being that it is a narrow lot.
And that does not include the approval for does not include the approval for a carport.
Yes.
It does. Would that be a separate issue, right?
We're not.
Should we put we're approving this, so many square feet, 250 square feet or whatever to cover it?
Okay, yes, we are approving, what was the amount of square footage, Joe?
212 square feet or something.
Well, you might want to just go a little above that, just in case some of these
212?
measurements are off.
Okay, 250. 250. We're approving 250 square feet for the accessory building. We'll do that separately with the carport, unless you all want to deal with the carport now.
I thought he withdrew.
I thought he said he didn't want the carport.
Okay.
He's got 4 years
Okay, no,
before he thinks
okay,
he can
well
do
then let's do 250 for an accessory building.
I only raised that point because it is listed as a
Okay,
part
well,
of the appeal.
we withdrew that, so let's just deal with the 250 square feet accessory building.
I'll second that. And
Joey Protocol, did we hit that right for you?
so if I understand the motion that I seconded, that we're approving up to 950 square feet of accessory buildings.
Based on the narrowness of the lot.
Without a carport. Okay, heard the motion. Second? Any other discussion? All in favor of the motion, say aye. Aye. Opposed?
Hey, 5-1.
Okay. All right.
You got it.
You got it. Congratulations.
Thanks for being here and being so straight with us.
Case is approved on a vote of 5-1. Next case before you, case 2013-100. Thank you, Mr. Page. Mr. Matthew Schutz is the appellant. Mary McMillan and Martha Thompson, owners of the property located at 2400 12th Avenue South. Requesting a special exception for street setbacks in CS UZO district to allow the rehab of a non-residence building and the construction of a new two-story outdoor dining area referred to the board under section 1712-035. The appellant has alleged the board would have jurisdiction under section 1740-180, item C. Use as restaurant. Parties are present. Sorry, I'm dealing with the tail end of a cold. The subject property you see here is on the northeast corner of Carruthers and 12th Avenue South in the 12 South area. ESCS zone. This is the area of subject property. The site plan as submitted by the appellant, the proposed addition is located at the bottom right corner of the site plan. I do have some later photographs submitted by the applicant to this board. Stefan's bringing around, no, I'm sorry, that's the next case. Never mind. These are the submitted by the appellant to our office, which I believe you all have a copy of. Two elevation views, first one from 12th on the top, and this view from Carruthers. And then a drawing depicting site visibility at the intersection. As you'll note, and I'm for the record for the guys sitting here, this case was filed as a special exception. Reading through your hardship, it appeared you're arguing an item A case that's not before this board. So if it's an argument, discussions of arguments of interpretation, I'm gonna have to cut you off on that. You are welcome to refile an appeal if you feel that the zoning administrator and the staff have misinterpreted the code, but that's not what's before here. So discussions need to stay on the special exception portion. I'm just reading through the hardship list submitted, talked about that end of it. So if that's an appeal you guys wish to make, we'll need to refile that as such and defer this case back. But I'd throw it out to you as an option. I was just looking through your papers there.
Joey, were some of the other cases that we've heard on 12 South, were those special exceptions for, those weren't variances, but those were special exceptions?
Yeah, they were.
The recent case of Sevier Park, that was across
special
from Sevier.
exception as
Special
well.
exception.
There may have been one that was a variance.
What about the McRedmond's case?
Special exception. 12th and Paris was a special exception.
Okay, I just want to make sure we were talking about the same.
Yeah,
doing the
they
same
are.
thing.
Because, and reason I'm glad you asked that question, there may have been a time frame this board heard a case that was a variance before the council changed the standard of review for this board for setback variances. You remember in 2009, I believe, the council changed the standard going from a variance, where you have to demonstrate hardship, down to the lesser standard of a special exception where you prove that you're not adversely affecting adjacent properties and whatnot.
Joey, I seem to remember, I think it was the Blind Pig, the old Mirror restaurant, as we are now, that Mexican restaurant nearby. They asked for we approved a patio out there. Do you remember how that was done?
That was a variance, because that was pre that amendment. I do recall that one.
Okay, so that's a case that's...
Yes, that was a variance. That was held by a variance standard.
Okay.
But all other cases, I think, since that time forward, have been special exceptions. Just want to cover that because I didn't want any confusion by especially members of my board that this is an item A case. It wasn't filed as such, but some of the argument in there talks about disagreeing with interpretation. So before we walk down that path, I wanted to try to address that first because that's not before you today. This is the subject property at the intersection at 12th and Carruthers. The approximate area the addition would be located in. This is a view of the tenant at the intersection there, and then a view north toward on 12th. This is Carruthers here. The addition would occur roughly in this area here. I think the applicant noted and did a good job showing on the elevation that sign is going to be removed. Is that correct? And reworked into the development. Okay. Sarcasm. Then a view along 12th, looking down Carruthers on the bottom right-hand photograph. Okay, we have received approximately 30 letters in opposition. I have received like 2 letters in support, and I received a late email. I'm sorry, I don't.
Do we have those 2 letters of support, Joey? Do you know?
I believe you do. If not, let me pull up my Outlook. I've got them in our inbox. That's there. But from an examinations review, what we do is looked at the proposed structure, made a determination that the table will guide the setbacks. They encroach within that and offer up this appeal by means of a special exception. Although you see these frequently, let me remind you your standard of review. In 1712-035, these are not the standards of review that you see for most special exception. Those 7 items that talk about architectural compatibility, those are not in here. Your standard review for setbacks, this is 1712-035. D2, and it says the applicant shall provide evidence to this board as provided in this section that the proposed building setback shall not create an adverse impact on adjacent properties nor detract from a strong pedestrian-friendly environment. That's your standard of review for setback special exceptions. Contrasting those from 1716-150 that deal with uses that are special exceptions. This is setback. Use is permitted in CS zoning.
Joey, I have a codes question that I'm not aware of. I'm assuming that this is legal. I'm not aware of a building that is 1 story that has a patio that's taller than the building. Does the code allow that?
The code doesn't speak to it. So under Dillon's rule, unless we specifically prohibit it, it would be permitted.
Okay, and I'm going to ask the applicant if they know of any other examples in Nashville. So.
Okay, I think that's really all I've got. So I'll turn it over to you guys. Show of hands of those parties here present in opposition to case. Okay, we do have a couple folks. The 3 of y'all, if you'll work together, you'll have 15 minutes to present amongst the 3 of you, so divide your time accordingly. I know other folks here in support for the case on 12 South. Any other parties not present?
Who's in here in support?
Okay. And same, sir, if you'd like to join those folks at the table, you're welcome to. You all have 15 minutes. You will have a period for rebuttal, Mr. Bondi's, of that 15, so save a portion however much you wish for the rebuttal. And with that, I'll turn it over to you guys.
Excuse me, before they start, I might also want to remind you that on rebuttal, you're only, according to our rules, only allowed to address issues brought up by the opposition, so you just make sure that you bring up everything you want to bring up in this case.
If you don't speak during the initial thing, you cannot speak in rebuttal. So if you want to come up and be on the record. Okay. Proceed. Introduce yourself.
Hi, my name is Blaine Bonadies.
Please press the button.
Hello?
The black button at the bottom, yeah.
Hello? Hi, my name is Blaine Bonadies. I'm the consulting architect for Lars, who is the restaurateur. Simply put, we are asking for a special exception, and we contend that this does not adversely affect the other residents in close proximity. We believe that we've followed the accepted planning principles according to those in the 12th Avenue detailed neighborhood design plan, which encourages those buildings to get pulled to the street to engage the pedestrians. We feel that.
Let me just, I stopped your time, I'm sorry. I meant to mention the planning department recommended approval. You have comments from their staff. I'm sorry, I forgot to mention that, and in my time it was important I get that.
I'd be happy to reiterate that the planning commission is on board as well. We believe that it will eliminate a conflict between the existing parking and an existing crosswalk across Carruthers Avenue by removing 2 cars. So effectively eliminating that possibility of the cars and the crosswalk, being in the same space at the same time. We also feel that this setback remains consistent with the contextual setbacks, in addition to all the other special exceptions that have been made along 12th Avenue South in regards to pulling the building forward. We feel like it does not obstruct the view angles necessary for safe pedestrian or vehicular traffic. And we feel that there's a number of business owners that would agree with any parking issues or anything like that with shared. This is not a variance for parking. We've met all those requirements. That's all I have.
Can you tell us what the parking requirements are? I mean, I think in some of the things that you all had submitted, I'd say there's a 47, but then it says basic parking with the new restaurant. You think you have 52?
Yes.
But then there's only 50 spaces?
We've got 2 on the street, according to the UZO.
It's got 2 here, right here.
So where are the 52 spaces?
We have 2. We're allowed in the UZO to use 2 street spaces, and the rest are interior to the lot or on the property.
Shared with mafiosos?
Are those 2 counted for codes? Are they on the right side of the street? Or correct side of the street?
Yes, they are.
We're not here to talk about parking. We've met those requirements.
It does affect the neighboring properties. We're talking about impact of neighboring properties, and so you're counting 2 spaces on the street?
We're allowed to count those 2
I know you
spaces.
are, but that might affect a neighboring property. We'll hear from the opposition,
Yeah.
so...
I mean, that was my question too. I mean, and I would hope that you all would be patient with any questions that we might have, because it's, I will say, it's extraordinarily rare. I haven't seen, but maybe once or twice in the 2 years I've been on this board, 26 letters of opposition. So it's
30.
Yeah. I'd counted 26 and wrote it, but you're right. That's what Joey had said. So, I mean, it's a sensitive case, and I think that all aspects of it should be discussed if it's relevant. And based on what Joey had said in terms of the guidelines that we need to go by in terms of impacting adjoining property, I think that parking is a relevant issue.
In order to bolster our case, we were asked to use our gross square footage as a calculation for those parking requirements. It is not, you don't have to use those gross square footages. It's really a net square footage. We can subtract out the bathroom. We can subtract out the offices. We can subtract out the kitchen, the back bar. Those all have occupant loads that are much lower than what we computed. So we are above and beyond what we believe is at least code worthy, and we're essentially following the rules.
Is the back parking lot, has it been paved recently? And I think notice that it says existing paving with new striping, and it's been several years since I've been in that back parking lot because it was a mess to get around and it was hard to find a parking space.
Proposed new striping.
So just new striping, but not new pavement or anything?
It's been resurfaced.
Okay, it has been.
Put the coating on, and we
Okay.
try and do that every 2 years, yeah.
Okay. Yeah, that striping, that'd be great. I mean, it needs it. And 50 spaces is a lot. So, I mean, we're not necessarily disputing the requirement, but we're trying to determine how that impacts the neighboring property.
How many chairs do you have in this restaurant, including those on the patio, proposed?
Right now, as I understand it right now, we have 81 chairs in the property.
Okay.
On the patio, you guys have the layout, don't they?
Yeah,
I think it's 25 a floor, or maybe 20 a floor.
Okay, so yes, this is a small space, and I've been in this, and you downplayed, we could back out the bathroom, all this other stuff, but it's 81 chairs. There are a lot of people that will come there, walking, cars, or whatever. Where do you think that they will park?
They'll probably park on site. If 4 people come in one car, well, that accounts for one space, 4 people. I mean,
But I also think that the great thing about that 12 South neighborhood is a walking neighborhood. That's why, one of the reasons why we have those crosswalks, and one of the reasons we want to put it there is so that cars, right now it's a parking space, but cars back into that crosswalk, and that's kind of what we want to take out of play.
Does your building have exclusively 51 parking spaces, or is that shared with mafiosos?
That building has
Your restaurant.
The restaurants, yeah, they're all combined. It's a single building.
Oh, so 51, that's including mafioso's customers too?
Sure.
Yeah, and I can't remember what that outbuilding is that's on the property. This says existing building, the one that faces Crothers is a house.
Oh, it used to be Corrieres.
And what is it?
We use it for storage now.
So it has no purpose. I mean, it would not be part
Also
of,
holds boxes and napkins.
it wouldn't be part of the restaurant or anything like that.
No.
Okay.
Have you contacted your councilperson about that? And if so, what does she say?
They were both at a public meeting that we had, neighborhood meeting. They were encouraging of the parking being a bigger issue for all of Nashville and not necessarily the burden on us because we are, again, meeting what the code requirements are. So there was a lot of talk at that meeting about things like striping the street as well so that those immediate areas would be parked more efficiently and there would be some delineation for those people that parked. For example, if someone pulls up in this odd space, then they effectively eliminate the possibility of 2 additional parking spaces. They talked about some, public parking structures. They talked about the possibility of parking, sharing parking with the newly opening school there. So there was a lot of encouraging talk. She also talked, Sandra Moore, talked a lot about, MTA and improving some of that public access via public transit, et cetera. I don't know.
Did she take a position on this project?
I don't think she was against it.
Or was she for it?
As I understand, she did not take any position at all.
That's fine. And I'll re-ask the question that I asked kind of out loud beforehand. I've been to many places in Nashville. I don't think I remember seeing a 2-story patio with a 1-story building. Can you think of another example?
Well, my question is the question that you haven't seen 2 stories, or have you seen patios that are above the elevation of the restaurant? For instance, something like Rose Pepper in East Nashville has you step up into the patio.
But it's not a 2-story. This is a 2-story patio, right?
It is a 2-story patio.
A 1-story building. Rose Pepper just has high ceilings. There's not upstairs in the Rose Pepper.
Well, my question is because of the elevation above the building that you have a concern?
This is a 2-story patio.
Yeah,
I'm asking where is there another 2-story patio and a 1-story restaurant?
Well, I can't say that I know of anyone.
I can't say that there's one either, and I go out with restaurants a lot.
It's certainly exciting to see one.
Well, it affects the pedestrian experience, and that's what we'll get to later. That's why I'm asking, and that's why I'm curious about this.
It certainly doesn't exceed some of the recent development in height. So as a structure,
yes, I'm not saying it's
abutted to the pedestrian way.
I'm not saying
it's not any taller than the other things that have been built there recently.
Well, I understand that.
Regardless of its use.
I'm not saying it's illegal. I'm just saying that, this 2-story patio is much different than a lot of places that are in Nashville, particularly this neighborhood, and that, having people on 1-story and 2-story looking down might have some sort of impact on pedestrian traffic. Do you agree with that?
As will the balconies that are on the 12th Street flats.
But the difference is they didn't have to come in front of us to get those balconies approved. You do.
Oh, okay.
Now, wait a minute. They probably got the special exception because that building was pushed back way off that property, and they pushed those buildings right up to
for not the balconies, but just maybe the footprint. Joey, do you remember what kind of, did HG Hills come in front of us for any variances?
No, the balconies are a permitted obstruction, so it's kind of here.
That's the difference. Those balconies are permitted. Your structure is not unless we approve it, so that's why I'm asking.
Okay.
If I can clarify a little on the parking, even though parking's not for you, they are code compliant. They are required based on everything laying out there today, 61 parking spaces, gross. You get 20% parking reductions based on MTA and sidewalk networks. It knocks them down to 49, and they have 52 there shown. So they're +3.
So Joey, let's clarify this. Without even counting street parking, they're compliant?
Yes.
Okay.
I don't have quite the access I did in the old building where I could get to our permitting stuff, but just doing it off the numbers I'm listing here and the parking requirements. That building in the back, we had it classified as retail, and there's no parking required for retail at 2,000 square feet or greater, or less. So,
And so if that
So going
building,
forward, it's
if
gonna be
that building
important
were
for
to
us
have
to-
any kind of restaurant service or become anything other than a retail operation, then
Yes.
then they would have to have a variance for that use in that
Potentially.
building, but that's not what we're here today.
no, not at all. And I didn't want to muddy up the waters, but I know some of that early discussion was about parking. I just wanted to alleviate any fears the board had.
You know, I'm sorry.
I agree with David Taylor. I mean, we have 30 letters of opposition. Why do we have 30 letters of opposition for this project?
Well, I think that the neighborhood, some people in the neighbors think that the street plan that was put in effect has affected some of their parking needs. And, you know, they're entitled to their opinion, but as long as we're compliant within the codes, then I don't want to be the person that, you know, we're complying, we're here, we're doing exactly the steps we need to do to create more business, to create more property value, to keep a safe neighborhood. And that's what we're here to do.
I guess the thing I'd like to have you talk about, and I think that, because I think you do talk about it in your proposal, is the two issues that I read in the letters, and it's a lot, and so, I mean, we'll hear from them, and you all will talk about it more. I mean, it is the reason that I think we give this a lot more attention. I don't think it is the reason that you necessarily go one way or the other with this. You take everything into account, and we certainly approved things that had a lot of opposition, and we've denied things that had a lot of opposition, and it's all independent of what the issues are with that specific case. But the two issues that they talk about parking, and I understand that, and we talked a little bit about it. We can talk about it more later. But the other issue is safety, and they talk about, and because I think you all have addressed safety, and I think you've and the Planning Commission has addressed safety in terms of that, what you're doing to that corner. Does it improve, or does it make the corner more safe or less safe? I think you said earlier you think it makes it more safe, and so I'd like for you to talk more about that and have that maybe a little stronger on the record to say, no, this is why, you know, we think putting this patio here in terms of visibility of cars, in terms of cars pulling out into, you know, the crosswalk, which I think one of the parking spaces can now. To talk a little bit more about your impression of what this does for public safety on that street.
For example, if you're traveling north on 12th Avenue and you want to pull into the westernmost spot there on the corner, you have to wait to turn right, make sure that the pedestrian way is clear, and then turn on top of the pedestrian way, parallel with the pedestrian way, to enter the property. You have to do the same thing to exit the property for that one space in particular. So there's one good example.
Will you have amplified music playing on this patio?
I don't have an answer for it. We're in the preliminary phases of this.
You're a restaurant owner. I mean, is there not going to be music out there?
Well, I would
You haven't
imagine
thought of that?
there might be some music out there. But I haven't really gotten there yet. I'm still picking out lights and trying to get through codes.
They would be restricted by other metro code for that,
But
you know.
we're talking about the pedestrian environment
I
and
get
how it's
that.
affected.
I thought we were talking about safety.
Well, I'm talking about the pedestrian
Oh, okay.
environment, which is one of our standards.
I don't think it's anything unlike what's almost within, I don't know, a few hundred yards of us, which is Taqueria del Sol, which I believe they pipe music out there. It's,
Or Urban Grub, who has the same exception,
yeah, they open up all the garage doors and
or they have patio all the way to the front.
yeah,
Zero lot line.
it's not exceptional.
And Mafioso's on the same property.
Mafiosos too.
But you're going airborne with seating, which is going to make a big difference to me. It's going to be, insofar as noise or sound out of that building versus any other structure that has open doors down at the street level or ground level. Am I wrong?
Well, the good thing is that both floors will be covered, so I mean that's going to reduce some of that obviously chat noise that happens. I mean, people are a lot louder than music.
No, I'm talking about the music thing as well.
I guess the only other question I have is kind of what's Plan B? I mean, if we're not, if this isn't approved, if we say, no, you can't have a patio, you still open a restaurant? You still increase the density in the spot?
Oh, yeah.
You don't need to come before us to do that. And so I guess that's, what is Plan B?
I think by right, we can put a patio out there without a special exception and go all the way to the property line.
So so then you would come back and ask for an item A appeal because you say that they denied your code or your permit in error. I mean, if they deny you a permit, you still have to come to us. You come back to us and say it was an error, right?
I think he's saying he doesn't have to come back to us at all.
We wouldn't.
Yeah,
we
I
wouldn't
think
come back to that.
it's permitted by right
Okay.
By property.
to go all the way out to the property line.
Can you repeat that for Joey?
And I guess,
Joey,
here's
get him to repeat
We
that.
have a new little issue that's come up.
Joey, I'd ask about what is Plan B, and here's the basis of the question, because if I have an argument that says no, it increases parking, it makes what is kind of a messy street, and I'm a neighbor, and I know it's a messy street. I don't drive anymore because I can walk, and I won't find I'm closer parking at my house, which is 5 blocks away. So I understand all of that and live it, but I'm just saying that if you can build a restaurant there anyway, and Blaine had said, well, I can put a patio there out to the property line, just wooden patio or of some sort, and that's the question: is that permissible without coming to us?
Yes, uncovered.
Okay, an uncovered patio. So that's what you're talking. Okay.
It's permitted in setback for purposes of parking.
So you could put a one-story uncovered parking or patio to the street, and so what I'm trying to get to the essence of is what is the impact of this decision from our perspective, and is it 14 more seats on the second floor? What is the marginal increase of what we're trying to decide? Because when I hear from folks, and we'll hear in a minute what different people have to say, when we talk about parking, we don't have a basis for challenging the parking, and we don't have a basis necessarily for challenging the restaurant because those are all currently under code. So we really have a very marginal area that we impact with this decision, and that's what I'm trying to define. And it's really the second story and the seats that might be on the second story, and any visual impact that has on traffic, safety, whatever that.
I don't know if this answers your question, but it certainly adds to some of might add to the understanding, is that we are limited to how much outdoor seating we have because it becomes cumulative with the inside seating we have.
Right.
So regardless of whether or not we do one or two, we're still limited to a certain amount based on code in conjunction with our parking requirements. It's kind of a circular.
Okay.
Understand?
No, I mean, it's a balance, but again, just and we get this a lot with areas and neighborhoods that are experiencing growth and change, and I'm just trying to help myself define and hopefully make it clear, if not kind of beat the issue to death, but with the folks that are listening, is that what truly is it that we're deciding and what is truly the impact of that decision. We're not voting to put a restaurant here. We're not voting to increase the density here. We're not doing anything about parking in terms of variance. So we're really just looking at this patio and the impact that the patio has. And so that's what I wanted to kind of put out there.
Let me dovetail on that just to make sure I understand. So regardless of the situation, whether we give this to you or not as a 2-story patio, you can put in the same spot a single-story patio.
That's a little bit larger.
Uncovered.
That's larger. Okay.
Uncovered.
Uncovered.
Up to the property line, which we are not proposing. with the two-story version. Because we're
Early in the
limited to the
discussion,
square
David
foot.
Ewing brought up the restaurant down the street. They were fine with their seated patio. The issue in that, they went out and covered it. Of course,
That
that
was
had didn't get a permit and all.
Right.
And just, I don't think it was discussed, but kind of for the record, when you calculated the parking requirement, the existing outdoor covered patio that Mafioso's has is included in that requirement of 50
I did.
spaces?
I included all of the square footage shown on this plan,
Okay.
with the exception of the cheese place treated as vacant. There was no parking requirement for it anyway as retail, so I took that off, but computed everything else, including the applicant's proposal, and there's still +3.
And that was gross square footage, too.
Yeah, now, what Blaine talks about, let me clarify. Under the zoning code, we count it all. Restrooms, kitchens, everything. The building code does get into separating seating area from that. So from our architect's point of view, that's, he's speaking that language to you. For us, we count it all, and even counting it all, there's still +3. If the zoning code allowed for us to back out kitchens and such.
Joey, will you point me to the criteria again, please, that we look at for special exception?
Sure. It's 17-12-035. Letter D and number 2. D1 really just says, in all districts, a principal or an accessory structure may petition to this board by means of a special exception. So it sets that out. And then B says that the applicant shall provide evidence to the board that the proposed building setback shall not create an adverse impact on adjacent property nor detract from a strong pedestrian-friendly streetscape. It does reference that 17-12-060 language, and that talks about F3 says the applicant shall provide, this talks about height, the applicant shall provide evidence to the board that the proposed building height shall not create an adverse impact on air, light, shadow, wind velocity patterns due to the configuration of the building relative to the maximum permitted height standards and its juxtaposition to and with other existing structures in the vicinity or approved but not yet built structures. In addition, the applicant shall demonstrate the proposed height contributes to and does not detract from a strong pedestrian-friendly streetscape. I was actually asked right during this meeting about amending the code. I would like to take that whole paragraph and write it in plain English. It's a bit wordy. Just my commentary.
Anything further to add? We'll start the opposition side.
No, we'd like to save that time.
You'll have 13 minutes and 1 second for rebuttal time. All right, the opposition can come forward now.
Mr. Chairman, I'm sorry I missed. How much time did the applicant have remaining? 13:01, thank you.
Introduce yourselves and proceed.
I think we decided I'll go first. My name is Catherine Moffitt. I live at 1100 Gilmore Avenue, and I'm here today to ask you to deny this appeal for a special exception at this property. Many of my neighbors have submitted letters detailing our shared concerns about safety issues and the parking and traffic congestion that will result from this structure if this special exception is approved and construction commences. I would like to call attention specifically to the letter that I submitted to the board. In it, I detail the history that the residents of 12 South have had with several of the merchants in the area, including the proprietors of Mafioso's who also own this new building. And I discuss the involvement of Metro Public Works and the Traffic and Parking Commission in helping us deal with this congestion. I spoke with our Metro Council member, Sandra Moore, this week, and she told me she would not be writing a letter in support of this project. As you know, our neighborhood has had several applications in front of you recently, and Council Lady Moore has often written letters of support. I think the lack of support from her shows just how contentious this project is for our neighborhood. This applicant states that the special exception should be approved because other buildings along 12th Avenue also have near zero street setbacks. That may be true, but these zero street setbacks have not been good for our neighborhood. The fact is, the close proximity of buildings to this busy street, coupled with bar and restaurant customers congregating on the sidewalks, cause visibility problems for drivers entering 12th Avenue. I have personally witnessed an accident at the corner of 12th and Paris, and there have been similar accidents and many near misses along this corridor. I often have difficulty seeing oncoming traffic when turning left onto 12th Avenue, and I do not have a two-story, near-zero setback patio bar at the end of my block. I can't imagine how much more difficult it would be if such a structure existed. If you have ever driven through this corridor during morning and afternoon rush hours, you know just how many commuters use 12th Avenue to access downtown. At the informational meeting Monday night, the architect insisted that the rendering showed an adequate plane of visibility for drivers turning onto 12th Avenue. However, we all know that the finished product of a construction project often looks very different from the initial rendering. The rendering also fails to take into account landscaping details and pedestrians using the sidewalk that interfere with this plane of visibility. In 2 years, Metro Nashville Public Schools will be reopening the Waverly Belmont campus to serve K through 4 students. The school is located at 12th and Carruthers, just behind this proposed development. When this happens, the intersection at 12th and Carruthers will become even more busier in the mornings and afternoons, with students walking to and from school and buses coming and going. We need to be more vigilant in monitoring how structures impose threats to the safety of our pedestrians, particularly these young students and the drivers along 12th Avenue South. As a property owner within 300 feet of this property, this development will negatively impact my personal property. Already, I have customers parking in the grass on my side yard, and I expect this problem to only get worse if this exception is granted. Therefore, I ask you to protect the integrity and the safety of our neighborhood and deny this application for a special exception. Thank you.
Do you think just a regular patio would decrease visibility?
I think a regular uncovered patio would probably be much less obstructive to the view of drivers. So, I mean, I think that would be something we would be more willing or happier to see. So, a one-story uncovered patio would not obstruct that visibility as much as a two-story covered patio would.
Assuming that there's no plants or, I mean, your average car is 5 feet high.
Right.
Your average person, eyeballs are 5 feet high. So if anything's over 5 feet tall in the allowed patio area, does that make it less obstructive than if it's 6 feet or 12 feet high?
I mean, I would think so, because you would have support columns and things like that holding up the roof and holding up the second story, that with an uncovered patio, you wouldn't necessarily have those support columns.
But you could have things that are
true
tall that are allowed.
Yeah, I guess. I mean, I certainly respect your opinion, but when I'm looking at the plan and elevation that was submitted, which you all probably saw as part of the neighborhood group, you know, what they're proposing is 24 feet off the corner and 6 feet off the property line. And I mean, I think even if it were 3 stories, it would probably be better than a zero setback, deck like they might have at Edley's down the street, which is, 3 or 4 feet off the ground. The people sitting, then all of a sudden, you've got 7 feet of blockage, at 0 feet versus, this 2-story addition, 6 feet back and 24 feet off the corner. So, I mean, like I said, I certainly respect your opinion that you'd rather have the lower one, but what I see.
Actually, I'd rather have none, because I think that any patio would detract from the pedestrian experience on that corner.
Yeah, and I understand that, but I just was, in the either or situation, because you would ask for Plan B, and if it were that, then, and that was a question that was posed if you had true, and I'm not surprised that none would be your first choice. So, and I don't know, and I understand the traffic issue, and it's such a hard one because I don't know what that answer is. I don't know if that answer is found in this board because, there are very specific rules that say how many parking spaces you have, but we know that this going from a wine store to a restaurant increases the density, and yet it meets what the law says that they have to have. So, that's a really hard one. I mean, I'm a neighbor also. I'm not as close a neighbor as you are, but I understand that issue in this neighborhood, and yet, you're kind of juggling.
Sure. Well, and I have concerns. I mean, if a driver is having difficulty seeing and pulls out in front of another vehicle and there's an accident, if there are pedestrians utilizing that walkway at that same time, they become collateral damage in an accident. And, we see more and more pedestrians, more and more young children and families and things like that using these sidewalks. And so, if there is an automobile accident, it's very entirely possible that a pedestrian would also be injured. And so that's why I have some concerns about those visibility issues, and we see that all the time of people pulling out in front of other cars that they couldn't see or they were trying to beat and couldn't gauge, their speed because of all of this distraction and everything being so close to the road. So.
In their proposal, they had talked about it actually creating a safer environment by having the patio there, because you do take away 3 parking spaces that are directly on that corner. That
if they're so concerned about that safety, they could just close those parking spaces. They don't have to necessarily put something in their place. I mean, they could just put landscaping.
Why is this structure by nature unpedestrian friendly? Why can't you just walk by it if they have it?
Well, I think some of the issues that you raised in your questions, the having a second story towering over you as you're walking by, the noise of that second story filtering down, and just saw the commotion that a 2-story patio would bring to an area that's just not used to having a 2-story patio. Most of the patios in that area are 1 story and are not as obtrusive to the pedestrian right away.
Now, and I mean, the planning department kind of has a little bit different view. The planning department said, we think that it actually is more pedestrian friendly, and that's one of the reasons that they've encouraged this board when we've seen cases, and we haven't seen all cases because a lot of them have been fully up to codes and didn't need to come here, but some that needed special exceptions, they really pushed everything toward the street, and this is a little bit of a hybrid because the building itself isn't pushed to the street. I think if they were going to build a new building, they would probably suggest that they do it like the Burger Up building and the one that was just approved on the opposite corner. So I don't know, I should ask you a question, but it was really there seems to be conflicting opinions on what's pedestrian friendly and the design, which makes our job a little bit more complicated.
As a pedestrian that utilizes that street on a daily basis, right. I would not find it very pedestrian friendly.
Okay. Yeah.
I'm Sarah Fortenberry. I live at 1001 Halcyon Avenue, and I'm a resident of the 12 South neighborhood. I would like to address we've talked parking a lot, but I'd like to address one more portion of parking. At the public meeting they had Monday night, we asked how many employees they have. Between the 2 restaurants, it's projected there will be 40 employees who are expected to use the same lots as the patrons. So we go from having 51 available spaces to 11 or 12 available spaces for the people who actually patronize the restaurants. So it is still a concern. I know that they are meeting all codes, but they're taking care of the employees and leaving a few, and then the rest of them are to be shared parking with either the businesses in the neighborhood who are willing to share their parking or the residents who are willing to give up parking in front of their homes. So I'm not sure we've completely, for my benefit, laid to rest the parking issue for our neighborhood.
I know there have been discussions in the neighborhood about parking, and there's been a lot of push and pull with the residents and the businesses about the neighborhood zone or whatever they put up, the little permit-only kind of areas and that kind of thing, and that's certainly bad for the businesses, good for the neighbors. But then on the other side, you all seem active neighbors. how are folks responding to
We
the
actually,
parking issue?
on Carruthers, Gilmore, and Montrose, about a year ago, applied for residential permit parking, and we went through the process. We met many times with the merchants to try to work out some compromises, and I talked a little bit about that in my letter. Our request was unanimously approved by the Traffic and Parking Commission. Public Works came out and installed signage, and then about 6 weeks later, they came and took the signage down because the merchants, the owners of Mafiosos, filed a lawsuit to reverse that decision, that unanimous decision by the Traffic and Parking Commission, and it's still currently in Chancery Court. It has not been decided yet.
I have another pedestrian question for you related to, you said you lived on Halcyon, so let's say if you're taking a nice evening stroll down 12 South on your way to the new Jenny's Ice Cream and you pass this structure, why is that interfering with your kind of enjoyment and your pedestrian experience?
I think the streets have gotten more and more crowded, and we are really a stroller neighborhood now. We used to be, kind of married people, no children. Now we're married people with like double wides strollers. So it's just become more and more crowded. And you bring up Jenny's, any kind of, child-friendly place like the Taqueria or Jenny's, and you just end up with a real crush of people. So adding one more structure that eases into that, I think I've talked about that.
But how does it,
before.
I'm not talking about Jenny's, and Jenny's will be popular like Sweet Cece's.
I'm talking about just making your way down the street.
But just you walking down the street on the way to Jenny's and you pass this two-story structure, what's wrong with that? How does that interfere with your being able to walk down the street?
It's just a feeling of the commercial district kind of crowding the street, as opposed to it being a nice, pleasant stroll. In other cities, you can do that without feeling that the commercial district is just pushing you and you're having to work around it.
My question is, what related to diners on this two-story structure of this new restaurant, how's that going to interfere with your enjoyment of an evening just walking?
I don't have a problem with diners. I think I'm worried about that encroachment. Blaine has just said, if we can't do the two-story, we'll come out a little farther. So it's kind of a losing battle anyway. If they're denied the 2 stories, he said, well, we'll just come out all the way to the setback that we're allowed. So I just think I'm looking for ambiance. I'm looking for a streetscape that's more pleasant, that has trees and is not crowded and is lovely to walk along, as opposed to feeling like I'm on Rush Street in Chicago the whole time.
So I still, I'm trying to be obtuse, so I'm still trying to figure out how this proposed structure is less pedestrian friendly than the cars parked in those same spaces.
I suppose it's a matter of opinion, and I'm just not expressing myself very well.
So
I find Burger Up obtrusive to the street because it's so tight to the street, and there's always such a line outside Burger Up trying to get, through there to walk down to the park if you're on that side of the street. It's just increasingly difficult.
Okay, you, sir.
Good afternoon, Joel Griffith. I live within 300 feet on Elmwood, so on the other side of 12th. And I would agree with what both of my neighbors have said here. I guess the one question about how is it more obtrusive, we're talking about removing 2 spots versus adding seating for 40 people. So, even if 4 people are carpooling, we're talking about 8 cars there versus 2 cars. So there's part of it right there. I think the other issue too is I have 2 young boys. We live dangerously close to Jenny's. I was there last night. And walking even there from my house, which is a block, is already dangerous. And I don't like it. I won't let them ride their bikes there anymore.
Why is it dangerous? What do you mean by that?
It's just there's too much traffic. There's too many cars. There's cars coming in and out of Mafiosos and now Jenny's. And so, to add another large establishment, I think is just a mistake for the neighborhood. I think the other thing I'll say too is that I have a kindergartner now and a 3-year-old, and so eventually, hopefully, they'll both be going to this school, and that will be our path to walk to school. And I'm assuming there'll be a crossing guard right there on 12th and Carruthers. So, you're talking about a walking community that's hoping to have this school back by the time my youngest goes to kindergarten. And now we've increased the traffic, we've decreased the visibility. I think it just adds more issues for the school as well.
And again, I walk down Elmwood from my house on Linden to get to the places that you talk about, and so I know how crowded that street is, and it goes back. People park all the way down Elmwood, and so I understand that. And I guess what I'm struggling with in terms of how I think about this is that a lot of the issues that I'm hearing seem to be kind of bigger structural issues, like that need traffic calming, traffic lights, maybe revised street parking plans and that kind of thing that are really kind of city council type issues that would really impact the pedestrian friendliness and the safety of the street. And it feels like that a lot of that kind of frustration of none of that happening, kind of comes out in these projects, which are marginal, and I get that every single time we have to make a decision on anything that happens on 12th Avenue, it does impact 12th Avenue. And from our view, we're, look at it and say, well, they can put a restaurant there and have the same occupancy for the restaurant because it's based on how many square feet they have, and they might add a few with their, with the patio, but Laney said, well, it takes away from inside and that kind of thing, and or if they don't have the second story, you're talking about 15 tables and that kind of, so when it boils down to what we're talking about, it tends to be less about the big picture and more about this specific issue, and yet it seems like the big picture isn't being addressed in the community in a way that satisfies the neighborhood and the businesses. I mean, it is a real issue, and what we're trying to struggle with is how much of that is really in our purview and how much can we impact it. I have a personal stake in it because I am a neighbor, and I would say experience it. I have no personal stake, but I do experience the neighborhood. I understand, personally how it all works. It's no different than other neighborhoods that we deal with too, in Five Points and in other areas of town. So I guess I just, again, that I should have asked a question, but I'm trying to say I'm very empathetic to what you all are saying, and we're trying to struggle with what's the right answer here. And and it may come down to a zero lot line patio versus a kind of a cool looking new kind of patio that's set back, and yet those other issues will kind of still be there. So.
And I understand that, and I think that's why we have tried to address the two issues that you have to talk about: the pedestrian experience and then the impact of surrounding neighborhoods and surrounding properties. And like I said, as a property owner who is directly impacted, my neighbors, we deal with monetary loss because of these cars that are parked on our yards. They're killing trees, they're killing grass, they're killing landscaping. There's a very real property loss that we're experiencing, and by allowing them to have a two-story patio, that allows them to have more seating, more customers, more cars. And those cars will cause a very real property loss to me and my neighbors.
One of the 30 letters we got in opposition is from Nathan and Tracy Hubbard, and I think this is a first for my time on the BZA. They also signed their 1-year-old son, Alexander, to this. And basically, their concern is talking about it being a stroller neighborhood now, that they push their 1-year-old son in a stroller around the neighborhood every evening and been watching everything change. So, does this really, going back to you with the young kids, are you less likely to push your kids around in a stroller or walk them around if this was there, and then why?
I would say yes. I think.
But why? It's a 2-story patio.
Right, which is adding a lot more patrons. And we all know how popular Mafioso's is.
But how is that bad for your pedestrian experience or your kids' experience?
Because that means more people, more cars, more traffic. I think that's the biggest issue for me.
Why, as a parent, you wouldn't want to walk over there then?
I think it's just a matter of traffic, more traffic. So there's another property, another restaurant that's great food and really crowded and very popular, which means more traffic. So which means more traffic on my street, which means more traffic on, walking around there as well.
So you're saying that affects the pedestrian experience just because there are more cars? I mean, what about walking past this structure? I mean,
more cars definitely affects the pedestrian experience.
But what's wrong with walking past a two-story structure with diners?
No, I don't think that part of it. No, I'm saying that the fact of the square footage of, or however many seats it's bringing, and allowing that many more people, I think that's the biggest issue for me. That makes it less pedestrian friendly in my view.
The earlier testimony was that they're limited by how many patrons they can have by virtue of the site and the parking. So they can increase those number of pedestrians without doing this.
I don't think that's necessarily the case. I mean, if they put that entire patio, that entire square footage on the ground floor instead of building up, they would have to take out more parking spaces, which would probably put them below the threshold of what's required.
But I don't think that's correct either, because once you have a certain number of patrons, you still have to have a certain number of parking. So there's a balance to be achieved there, and any business is going to maximize the number of patrons they can have, regardless of how they do it, vertically or horizontally.
And by right, they can put that restaurant and get as many patrons in there as they can within the law and the fire codes and the other things. So the question really is a matter of whether it's going to be a two-story patio or a one-story patio. And I don't see that difference in my mind. I don't see the correlation between that and the number of parking spaces.
Well, I don't think we've talked about that. I mean, I think we're talking about the experience of walking by a two-story structure as opposed to a one-story structure. I mean, when I see a two-story patio, I think about New Orleans and people hanging off the patio and things like that. And that's not really something I want to walk my 5-year-old and 2-year-old past.
So are these people
I don't know. I mean, what kind of...
Are these people at an upscale, nice 12 South restaurant, if they're on the second level, going to be hurtling insults down?
I don't know what kind of restaurant this will be, and there are some patrons that have come to the 12 South restaurants that we have seen behaving in that manner, even if the restaurants themselves call themselves upscale.
And that would keep you from wanting to walk by this restaurant?
Yeah. I've already started avoiding walking down parts of 12th Avenue with my children.
Because?
Because of the bars and people smoking and things like that. So when we go to the park, a lot of times we'll walk down 10th.
Anything further to
For the record, we have nothing further.
We appreciate your time.
So I guess the only question that, I don't have a question. We've beaten parking to death, and it will continue to be an issue. And I guess that it seems like the leadership on that issue may need to be the business collection that's on that street, and certainly if Chancery Court rules against you, then you're really going to have a mess and have something to solve. But I guess that's your problem to solve, and you will have to solve it when that time comes. But everything that we've ever heard, anything that we've done on 12th Avenue says that some of those big picture issues need to be addressed, and so it would be great if the Business Coalition would help take leadership on that. But that's just a comment, not a question.
Can you give the opposition some comfort? You heard the statements and comments about their concerns about activities on the upper floor there. Can you give them some comfort?
Well, we are not open at a New Orleans bar, if that's what you're asking. There will be no beads thrown.
What type of restaurant is it?
We're opening. I'm from Alaska, and we're opening Ember Ski Lodge, and it's a gastropub. So it's fine handcrafted foods, handcrafted cocktails. It's going to be a little bit higher end. It's going to be a little nicer. It's something I wanted to do from growing up. So, and I'm going to take my shot.
What about the menu?
Oh, well, I'll post the menu later, I promise.
For those old-timer Nashvilleians, not to be confused with the old Embers downtown in Printers Alley.
Yeah, okay.
Oh, man.
I don't know what that is.
It's famous, yeah.
It's just a copyright issue you have to deal with now.
Okay.
You're
I'll get a
fine.
cease and desist.
No, you're fine with the name.
Anything
Might be good
further to
marketing.
add? Any other questions? Well, we'll close the public hearing.
Thank you.
And we are ready for discussion.
I don't know why you always look at me for discussion.
Because you've owned this floor.
I think I've said enough. Too much and enough.
What are your feelings? I mean, you have a big investment here. What are your thoughts?
I think that the whole corridor is changing rapidly and changing in a way that is difficult. And the traffic congestion issues are extremely real on this street. And I understand all of that, and I keep going back to what does that have to do with what we're doing today, and I don't know that it does.
Can we hold them responsible for that?
You know, and that's why I asked the question of what is the marginal impact of this patio, not of the restaurant, because we're not talking about they can do a restaurant now. And what is the marginal impact of this patio, and does it meet the issues, the criteria that we're talking about? I don't have a comment. Someone else can comment about the impact on the neighboring properties. I do agree with the Planning Commission that this is preferable to a single-story, zero lot line patio in terms of pedestrian friendliness and, I think that this, I think they've met the pedestrian-friendly aspect of the criteria with what they've proposed, in my opinion. And so the other piece of it is the impact on properties, and I think that's a very complicated one, and people may have opinions on it, but I do think the pedestrian friendliness of it is there.
I disagree with you and the Planning Commission on this. I don't think that this two-story structure that's covered is pedestrian friendly, and particularly as people walk down with their strollers and there are people towering above eating, and I don't think they'll be shouting out things down to people very often, but it does change the kind of look and feel of the neighborhood. This particular area, from the tap room to Mafioso's, are these kind of one-story structures, even Urban Grub, and to have this kind of towering two-story thing above the street level, Jenny's Ice Cream in kind of legal terms is an attractive nuisance, meaning it kind of attracts kids, and so people will be going down this side of the street, and I just don't see how, so many seats out on a patio in a very lively area as it is does not affect the pedestrian experience. We have 30 letters of people in opposition. I'm not discussing traffic. It's, to me, that's not as relevant as what we're here to decide is this structure influence the pedestrian experience. And I don't, and the other thing, if it's uncovered, as we know, we go to our favorite restaurant, it's raining, don't go out in the patio. But if it's covered, if it's raining, you do. And so this will be more active than an uncovered one-story, and there'll be fewer seats, even with a one-story, even with a larger setback. So to me, that really affects the pedestrian experience.
I am sympathetic to the landowner, as always, I think, because especially with this craze of development in this area, I hate for other people to come in and have opportunity to expand and do new and exciting things. And on the other hand, while I haven't made up my mind, deny it here. But I agree with David, it has nothing to do with parking. I mean, that is simply not our issue. But to ask for a special exception when he can do what he wants to do without it. He can use his property within what he already has. And I would point out, it really is the applicant is supposed to provide evidence to the board. We don't have to look to the opposition to defend what he's trying to do. Really, it's their burden to say, this is why this is not going to impact adjacent properties. So I just add that for consideration.
I think an interesting nuance of this, and Joey, correct me if I'm wrong, but the reason this is a special exemption is because the code is silent on the issue.
Not exactly. I mean, well, the council changed the standard by which this board's to review requests to be closer to the street than allowed. They
But
went from
aren't the
hardship.
aren't the design guidelines?
No, they are merely policies that guide the planning department staff. They're not legislation. They're not ordinance. They're internal policy documents.
So it's because they want to move closer to the street.
Try me again on that portion, I'm sorry.
The reason that they're asking for the special exemption is because they want to move closer to the street.
Yes, zoning code requires them a fixed number that they have to be in, and they're closer to the road than that, which normally triggers a variance, but the council said, look, in the UZO, it's special exception, a lower threshold. You don't have to demonstrate physical hardship, and they laid out specifically for you what you're to look at.
And if they were to demolish this building and build a new building, their setback would be?
It's not that easy.
Well, there certainly wouldn't be off-street parking in the location that it is now at the front of the building. It would be closer to the street.
That would be up to traffic and parking if they would allow such to remain.
But it would certainly go against the guidelines.
Guidelines have no bearing upon the zoning code. That the DNDP that's discussed here is not an ordinance. It's not adopted by the Metro Council, so it carries no weight like the zoning code does.
Joey, we have some confusion over here.
Sure.
Help some of us out. During the testimony, I think we heard that they are allowed, without having to come before us, to do a single-story uncovered, right? Zero lot line?
A uncovered patio is not subject to setback. The point at which you cover it, now, let me back up. It is not subject to setback, but does count toward your required parking. Because for us, the restaurant is the people. It's the gross floor area.
And is that on the surface, or can it be an elevated deck? Can it be a step up?
For us, if you get over 18 inches above grade, we count it toward your setback.
They could build a deck that is 17 inches but level, because you want a level floor, and that would be okay to the lot line.
Yeah, if you've seen the outdoor seating area at Frothy Monkey over by Belmont, that's subject to setback because it's elevated such that it's above grade that we're counting.
And so at what point, if they decide to cover it, Mafia just covered their parking lot, and it's pretty close to the street.
Yeah.
So did they come here? How did they get that covered?
I don't know.
It
probably predates this.
I don't want to, but if they wanted to cover this parking lot at some future date, are they supposed to come here?
Yes. After the adoption of that ordinance, they have to come here.
Okay. So the other one may have been before the ordinance. I don't know, but all right.
Before the zoning code as well.
So I'm not trying to beat a dead horse here. I'm just trying to get a clear understanding on what is allowed. So they could build a patio, and you're saying it goes up to 18 inches, or it starts at 18 inches when you have to apply setback?
At grade or elevated above 18 inches, it's not subject to setback. It's a permitted obstruction, allowed to be in the setback, uncovered. You get above 18 inches, and then I'm treating it just like a regular part of the structure. It is subject to setback. You come to this board and ask for permission to encroach.
So again, if they had a patio, and again, to level out all the site issues, and it were 17 inches, and they put a guardrail around it, we're still okay?
Yep.
So
long as it's uncovered.
So they could have an uncovered 17-inch patio with a 42-inch solid guardrail, which is up to almost 5 feet. It's still less obtrusive visually than this two-story thing at 5 feet, as far as sight lines go.
Well, no, because
Well-
they can bring that up to the corner.
That's what I'm saying.
Yeah,
I mean-
what they're proposing is 6 feet off.
Yeah.
Right.
The property
But I'm
into-
saying what can legally be done with nothing is more obtrusive and closer to the street. I may not have said that correctly. I'm sorry.
But that's really
Sorry.
not our place to say. I mean, that's if their plan
Well,
B, and, you know,
We are addressing the adverse effect.
But our job is not to address what they're going to do if we rule a certain way. It's not.
Well, I'm not, but I'm also saying that what is now is our vehicles that are not any different than that hypothetical patio that I just said as far as obstructing the sight line. And I don't see how anybody could say that walking behind a car in a parking lot between a street and a parking lot is less pedestrian friendly than walking between a structure and a street.
Yeah. Joey, can you read the standard again to us that you read at the beginning of what we're supposed to decide this case on?
Well, if Ms. Jones doesn't spill everything. Applicant shall provide evidence to the board provided in 17-12-060 that the proposed building setbacks shall not create an adverse impact on adjacent properties nor detract from a strong pedestrian-friendly environment. Just say soft.
I guess that those are pretty soft definitions.
So is the building itself at the setback line?
The existing structure?
Yes.
I have no idea.
I mean, I guess my question
My gut
is,
feeling is probably the existing structure encroaches into the setback today.
so they could not add anything above the floor line out there without the variance. Is that correct?
Mr. King, I mean, I'd have to have a plan to look at to say that for certain, but yeah, if you had an existing structure at one story that is inside the setback and you want to add a floor to it, you're coming here. Now, you'd fall under 17-12-060 for height. You wouldn't, you're not coming any closer than the existing setback of the existing building, so I'm not going to ding you for a setback variance because it's the same plane, if you're pumping out closer to the road, yeah, but you might have a height issue there.
I think I could argue this case both ways, frankly. I agree about if it's raining, not covered, they're not out there. But neither are the pedestrians, are they?
That's right.
I think in that neighborhood, people walk just to walk. Rain's not going to deter them, but sitting outside for an hour and a half, you might not want to sit outside. They probably wouldn't serve you. But people run all the time in the rain and in the cold, and particularly in this area of town. So I don't think it, the standard that Joey read, detract from a strong pedestrian environment. I think that's a high standard. I don't think that's soft. I think a strong pedestrian environment, if you distract from that, I think a structure like this, which is 2 stories and has all those people out and in this very busy corner does.
Yeah, I mean, I guess, and it really does come down to, and we've heard a lot of differences of opinions from the Planning Commission, from folks on the board, from the folks that testified of what a pedestrian-friendly environment is. And, I, for the first time, walked down, I can't remember, Division, whatever the street is, it has, rebar and the new little cider place that got reviewed.
Yeah, Division.
I think it's Division, and you're right. And, had to walk a block, and I'd never walked down the street since all those places came, and they were all really crowded. It was Sunday of the Titans game.
I mean, yeah, everyone's
and it felt really pedestrian friendly. And it felt pedestrian friendly because there were people on patios right up by the sidewalk. And so, again, it goes to kind of what does one feel like pedestrian friendly is?
I guess what the opposition would say is that's not, it used to be, but it's not really a residential neighborhood. My law firm's near there, but, these are moms and strollers and people that are just running around the neighborhood and walking to get some ice cream. So I think that's the difference of the Division Midtown example than this. You live over there, know.
No, I understand that. I'm just saying it's what, I've heard folks say that, the line at Burger Up isn't pedestrian friendly, but I see a lot of neighbors and have a lot of conversation, and for me that experience is, and so I'm just saying that there's an honest difference of opinion sometimes in what that really means. And that's where I think some of the gray is in this question, because it's difficult. I mean, I see people in the group, and when 100 people were in line at when Jenny's was giving away free ice cream, and I had to turn around and walk home because I was 101st in line. People were having a really good time. They were crowded on the street, but it was a friendly environment full of pedestrians, and yet if I were walking two dogs and a baby, I might have a tough time getting through all that. So I understand that for some it's a wonderful thing and for some it's not.
But I guess the difference, as I brought up during their testimony, was Jenny's and that Hill property did not have to come to us for any sort of variance. This does. And our standard is, which as our board member very correctly pointed out, it was their burden of proof to show that it does not distract from a strong pedestrian-friendly environment.
I hear what you're saying, David, and the reason I went and got this is because I think there's some important elements, and this is the growing pains of economic development, right? So what we're facing is kind of a dual-fold issue. One is that they live pretty close to the urban core, and it is going to be traffic. I mean, we come from Murfreesboro. There's more traffic than it's part of the growth of our city. It's part of the frustrations that we're all having with planning, right? But the problem I'm having with this is that the council and designers and the neighborhoods have come together and talked about what the intent is for the growth in a lot of these areas. And planning perfectly says right here in this report that it is consistent with what the intent is for that area, which was the development of that was done by the neighbors. It was a part of those long-range plans and the intent of the overlay. So I think we have to be conscientious about the fact that we are being so empathetic and sympathetic, some of us, with the condition of trying to raise children in a neighborhood, but also being cognizant of the fact that this is right in a very high-growth area. Well, the whole city's in high growth. So there's a delicate balance that's going on here.
My arguments for this the whole time has been about this particular piece of property. I'm not talking about Burger Up. I'm not talking about all the growth in urban grub and parking issues and all that. I'm talking about this property and how this particular structure they propose affects this corner. And I understand what planning wants to do, larger for the neighborhood and all that, but we are here to talk about whether this two-story patio is going to distract from the strong pedestrian and friendly environment. And I think we've had testimony, we've had letters, and I think it does.
That's where, before I finished, I'm sorry, but that's what I was trying to say to you is that having done a lot of these studies and the arrangements that I've been involved with, where that whole urban thought is coming from is bringing the buildings closer to the street, engaging the pedestrian in the experience, and instead of so far back with parking in front of it and creating a distance between the engagement of the establishment and the residents. So I certainly understand because it's not the usual situation, but I do also think we have to think about the fact that it doesn't, it's not against what was intended by their own constituency, is what I'm trying to say.
No, but I agree. I mean, all that planning stuff, that's one thing. But once again, we have a case, two-story patio, and that's what we're supposed to decide. 12 South will boom, and it's going to go on.
That's what I'm trying to say.
I guess my thinking on it is that any safety issues that result from this two-story patio are a result of increased density, which really isn't on our plate, rather than the architecture of the patio itself. And I know there's a disagreement on whether, really, I think there's probably two disagreements in the nature of it being more pedestrian friendly, but also whether we should consider, what alternative the restaurant might have if they feel like they need to have 32 seats at tables outside and maximize their other space. But I just do agree with the Planning Commission on the pedestrian friendliness of it, and respectfully disagree with the folks that have a different opinion, although I perfectly respect their opinion and their experience is different. So, I medo think they have met that one aspect of of their burden. Now, the other aspect of it we haven't discussed, and that's the impact on the neighboring properties in the neighborhood. But
Well, do you think they've met that? They have to meet both.
I don't know, because I think if they were the pace setters of this 12 South, if they were the first restaurant, wouldn't even be talking about it. And so the question I'm asking is, are we putting a marginal burden or an extra burden on them because...
I'm actually not. Like I said, I'm looking at this as a case, everybody else is their own separate case. Other people have brought up what happens at other restaurants. I'm looking at this particular corner. We've heard testimony about people being able to walk to a new school, walk around the neighborhood with strollers, and that's what I'm looking at.
Well, and I'm saying in that case, if you're looking at a 2,000 square foot restaurant that has access to 50 parking spaces, which if you look at this purely independently without regard to anything that's around it, then there's not an issue at all. But the fact is that it has other things around it. The 50 parking spaces are shared by another business, and so it doesn't have access to all those parking spaces.
Well, the impact on neighbors could be things like sound and noise. And yes, I know there's a decibel rules here in the city, but if it's 2 stories up, like Dick King said, it kind of projects higher and longer and further for some of the people that live very close to that. And I think that also has an effect on the neighborhood too.
No, I agree with that.
I don't necessarily agree with that. I think all the establishments, when you're living in an urban core, you deal with the hustle and bustle of all things going on. And quite frankly, every one of those restaurants and every one of those establishments is held to the same conditions under which they need to operate as the rest of the code people. You know what I'm saying? I don't think that there's a separate standard because they've got this patio that the noise is going to be exceptionally...
No, but this structure introduces a 2-story outdoor patio to the neighborhood, which doesn't exist, and so that's different from what other things that are going on.
Do you think the 2-story patio creates a traffic problem or visibility?
It creates a pedestrian problem, I do.
I'm talking about the traffic. Let's take the traffic. Do you think it's a traffic hindrance or a danger?
There'll be more cars, but like I said, I'm not getting in. That's not point of my concern about this.
All right. My opinion on the pedestrian-friendly thing is, what is pedestrian-friendly? I think that's kind of like beauty. It's in the eye of the beholder.
I think pedestrian-friendly is being able to walk from one street to another and just kind of enjoy it and uninterrupted in the kind of same pleasant experience you would have had before the proposed structure. That's my standard.
And you feel like the patio, 2-story patio is going to do that? If it were empty? If it were empty?
If it were empty, it's still the reason that this is affecting the experience. Sight lines. As I said, from the tap room to Mafioso's to this building, all these little kind of 1-story restaurants across the street, I think the towering over the street level, that does affect your pedestrian experience.
Does it bother you on Belmont when you see these 2-story restaurants, when you're walking across the sidewalk, they're right up there on the sidewalk? Does that bother you as a pedestrian?
I think the restaurants that you're talking about on Belmont, the restaurant itself is in a 1-story structure in an old 2-story home. But the actual restaurant where people are being served, whether it be PM...
scalability. Does that bother you as a pedestrian?
No, but like I said, the difference is nobody's upstairs in PM and then Chago and then Arnold's new restaurant, Boulevard. It's the dining is all, and I think there is something to be said that people eating above street level, looking down, maybe hearing things, that affects things, and that's why this is different.
I guess the only example I can think of in is South Street, which has kind of that open air second floor.
But the whole building that's the building.
the whole it's not a patio. The whole building's open, but the noise and other issues that one might experience around there, and that's a mixed use.
As we said once again, that area, I mean, the Adelicia's there now, but it's, it's not like the old, this is a bunch of single-family homes and a lot of young families.
We have clearly two positions on this, and we can probably sit here for a long time and still banter back and forth. Does anybody want to make a motion one way or the other? And let's see where we go.
All right, Joey, I'm going to make this motion, but this is the first time I think we've seen this before, so help me out here. But let's see. I move that the board approve the special exception for the setback and under 17-12-035, saying that they have met the conditions required by the code.
You want to put any conditions on that, like noise, sound, or anything?
They've got to live up to all of those conditions by the city. I don't need to be their policeman.
Okay.
The condition is it's a special, well, I just note, as a special exception, it is the plan that's submitted, and it's not to deviate from the plan that's submitted. And if it does, then they substantially, I think, is
substantially
determined by
rules,
by codes. It's and so if it does, then anyone would have the right to bring it back to us and say they didn't do what they said they were going to do, and they didn't have permission. So there doesn't need to have that condition because it is limited to what they submit, right?
Your rules state that I and the codes department on your behalf can allow minor deviations as long as it doesn't substantially deviate from what you approved. Now you can place that drawing right there if you want to. But yeah, we do have some leeway to allow things. Let's say they get in a review and the fire code says, "Hey, look, you got to move this thing." It doesn't have to come back here.
Okay, we have a motion.
I'll second the motion.
And a second. Any other discussion? All in favor of the motion, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed?
Show hands. Show hands. Aye.
Yeah, let's show a hand. All in favor of the motion? Opposed? Well, that's 4 to 1, 2.
You got 3.
Did you vote? One more time.
One more time.
Put your hands up high.
Aye.
There's 3.
Opposed?
I'm going to oppose based on the evidence presented.
My understanding, as I read Robert's rule, is the chairman really doesn't vote unless it's in a tiebreaker. Am I right or wrong?
Well, they would need 4 votes.
I'll ask the legal counsel.
Sometimes the rules of the board will actually dictate that. I believe the planning commission states that the chair is deemed to vote with the majority and will break any ties.
Okay.
Which is not, but that's specifically in their rules. That's not in your rules. Your rules are silent. So
The chairman's always voted.
Guidance, Jody.
you have the right to make a vote. I don't want to mess up any precedents, but
Where have we been on that, Joey?
Yeah, the chair was always voted.
If he doesn't vote, he would have to abstain.
Yes.
You would have to either abstain or vote.
Okay, I will vote, and I will vote in favor of it. I think it can be a nice addition to the neighborhood. I've seen areas in cities like Chicago where I've seen a very similar thing, very near residential neighborhood, and it seems to work marvelously. And I see Nashville as a growing and exciting city, and I hope it works out that way. So I vote yes.
With that vote is 4 in favor, 2 against. Motion carries. The appeal is granted.
I just want to say a word of caution. I know they've just walked out the door, but I think it's very important that you engage your community in these discussions and welcome them because I think you all are going to have to find a way to live together, right?
And there is an active dialogue going on right now.
Yeah, I'm
There's some
familiar.
things you don't know about that are coming up that are going to solve parking problems.
Good. Good.
It's just that they're not solidified yet, so we can't really disclose them.
Well, we look forward to seeing your restaurant.
Totally good.
Chairman, can we have a brief recess? May we have a brief recess?
Across the street from the Green Hills Mall. This is the subject property here, seen in red. This building has been removed from the structure. The new proposed structure, you have an elevation. Stefan, would you pass those out, please, sir? Okay. You have before you the copies that are on the display board. This is a site plan submitted by the appellant. Two variances involved here. The first is the parking requirements. This property is outside the urban zoning overlay, so does not have the parking breaks like the prior appeal. Based upon the square footage in the building, there are 38 parking spaces required. This parking deck will be located on the ground level of the building, which you see there, with the offices sitting above. There are 33 spaces shown in this parking lot. The second issue are the proximity of these compact spaces toward the entrance. The code requires 20-foot setback before you reach the first parking stall. So that's the variance in queuing. There has to be a 20-foot separation from when we enter the property line until we reach the first parking stall, which would be approximately here. That's the layout there. This is looking at the subject site facing west away from Cleghorn. The mall is at my back, and the adjoining properties north and south to that. And then a view looking sort of counterclockwise, I guess. Yes. Across to the mall in this new area here. We have received a letter from Councilman Sean McGuire in support of the case. We've received 2 letters in support and 4 letters in opposition to the request. Traffic and Parking has commented they take no exception to the request before you. And with that, I'll turn over to you all. Are any parties here in opposition to Case 101? Okay, seeing none, you'll have 10 minutes to present your testimony. Skip to reset the clock.
All right.
And turn it over to you all.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Chairman, Mr. Secretary, I should say, and thank you, members of the board. Appreciate your service to this committee. My name is Andrew Walters. I'm with Littlejohn Engineering, representing the applicant today, joined by Jeff Haynes, representing the development group. And Joey did a good job of explaining our situation with the amount of parking. This site is unique in that it's very narrow. It's only 75 foot of frontage on the road, and as you can see, we have literally maxed out every square foot of the property for parking, even to the tune of adding 10 compact spaces, which you know is less than ideal, but it's required for us to maximize the amount of parking. And similarly, as Joey discussed, the variance for the queuing setback was also required so that we could put as many spaces on the property as physically possible. We are constrained on the back part of the property by a 5-foot landscape buffer that is required from the adjoining use. And as you can see, we are meeting our 5-foot side setbacks exactly to the tune of 5 feet on each side. I will say one slight modification to what is presented on this screen versus what you see in the rendering here is that we are looking to introduce a low screen wall element. We feel that'll help break up that close proximity to the parking spaces, and hopefully will go a long way to enhancing the pedestrian experience through that area. And part of the reason we feel like this variance is warranted, in addition to just the unique shape and size of the property being so small, is that we are within walking distance, only a few hundred feet away from the Green Hills Mall, and there is a transit stop there. And so we feel like that's an appropriate request for the size. I'd like to turn it over to Jeff this time, and he can talk a little bit more about the development team.
I'm sorry.
Yeah.
On the queuing distance, Joey may have said this, but what is your queuing distance now?
Well, you're looking at about 5 feet to the right of way. Out to the curb, you're looking at probably about 10 to 15 feet.
Okay, thank you.
Mr. King and fellow members of the board, thank you for your service to the city. I'm Jeff Haynes, Boyle Investment Company. I live at 2404 Golf Club Lane in Green Hills. I'm the developer working with both families on this project. I've worked with the Farnett family for over 6 years, trying to find the right partner and use for this very special piece of land to them. It's been the family for over 30 years. The family children's publishing education business was in the building forever and ever and ever until the building burned 6 years ago. And since that point in time, I've been working with them. We've passed on a lot of uses, including potential rezones for Starbucks, banks, that would have created more issues. And after long last, we found the right partner. The third generation of family members are now involved with this, and they're planning on the fourth generation. So this is going to be one of those pieces of property that never changes hands. It's going to remain in the families forever and ever and ever. The hardship we face is the size and shape of the lot. It makes it very impractical to go down with a garage or go up above with a garage. Green Hills Mall is planning to add another garage on the surface parking lot to the north of us. So we have significant mall parking directly across the street. And as Andrew mentioned, we do have a transit stop within 500 feet of our proposed building. We acknowledge we do not meet the required parking. The article that I've given you really indicates the trend we as developers and the city is facing in this ever-changing world, and that's the millennials are not using cars. They're using other forms of transit. They're sharing cars. They're walking. They're biking. The article suggests all because they want to text. So we're trying to plan for less cars from a long-term perspective since this building is going to be owner-occupied. I want to offer the following from our experience as a long-term owner and developer. The two families have created an ownership structure that anticipates gifting to children who are currently in grade school and thus plan to own the asset for a very long time. This will be a private building with one family occupying 3,500 square feet on the third floor for their family business, thus as an owner-occupant who will live and breathe the building every day, making sure we don't create parking problems. Partners in the family business already live very close to the proposed building and plan to bike and walk to work. There's a bus transit stop, as I mentioned, within walking distance at the mall, and the mall is planning to add additional parking. Leasing discipline will be used to lease the two remaining spaces, and if you look at this board, you'll see the two remaining spaces on the second floor. One is 3,200 square feet and one is 4,000 square feet. If you think about dense users in our business, call centers, insurance agencies, et cetera, most of those users are leasing 10 and 15 and 20,000 square feet. They're not leasing 3,200 and 4,000 square feet. The spaces are going to be leased to strategic friends, business partners, and family members because it's a private building. We will be market-driven and we will be self-regulating to make sure that we don't put in dense users. Self-policing will be offered to our neighbors if, in fact, parking is borrowed on a rare occasion. We will ask the tenants who will be in the building to move their cars immediately. We have researched all smaller buildings in Green Hills, and they provide a similar, if not lower, ratio of three spaces per rentable square feet in the building. Bedford Avenue, just behind us, which isn't in a UDO, would require only 19 spaces on site for a similar 11,000 square foot building. We're not in the UDO on Bedford, we're not in the UZO, so that's the reason for us being before you today. The families have migrated to higher quality materials and a more attractive design, as you can see from the rendering, that will be more sustainable for long-term ownership. Thus, we have maximized the allowable FAR and parking for the shape of the lot. We have the support of our councilman and 4 additional adjacent lot owners. One owns 3 lots and wrote a letter, who support the design and use of our project. In closing, we have worked tirelessly for 6 years to arrive at a solution that supports the family's long-term ownership philosophy, achieves an architecturally attractive building of high quality for the neighborhood, and restore the family legacy of owner occupancy on the site. We ask your support for this variance.
How many bicycle racks do you have?
We will have 1 bicycle rack in the rear of the building.
Thanks.
I guess I'm trying to figure out what the hardship is, because I don't see a hardship. I mean, I see trying to build too big a building for the number of parking. I mean, it seems like it's gone backwards instead of forwards. It's like, if you know you can get 32 parking spaces on the site, why wouldn't you build a building that supports 32 parking spaces? And, and it sounds like you're leasing 7,000 square feet, so it doesn't sound like that the family business has a need for 11,000 square feet if you're going to be renting some of it. So I'd like to know what your take on the hardship is.
Yeah, from a long-term ownership perspective, if the family's going to own this for 50 years, you're not going to go build 6,000 feet. You're going to try to build the maximum allowable FAR, and that's what we're proposing to do.
What you're doing, because you're having to ask for a variance. I mean, the maximum allowable.
The FAR allowable is the 11,156.
Right, but not with.
We are trying to anticipate use of different means of transportation over the long term. And based on the market behind us on Bedford Avenue, which has less parking, based on the mass transit stop at the mall, based on the public garages across the street, we're seeing a trend going forward of less parking.
Do you have any agreement with the Green Hills Mall for the use of their parking space?
We do not.
But so I guess. So back to the question, what is the hardship?
The hardship is the narrowness and shape of the lot, which prevents us from going below and building subsurface parking or going above and building structured parking. It's a 75-foot wide lot that makes it very difficult. So we have literally maxed out the parking.
Right. I mean.
So if you don't get the variance for the queue, then you're down 2 more spaces, which, how many is that? 30, I forgot how many you had.
We have 33 right now.
So you'd be down to 31, so how much square footage does that translate to that you would lose?
Code required is 1 space for every 300 square feet.
We'd probably lose close to 2,000 square feet. And as you all know, this gets back to, an iterative circle of we're trying to build a really high-quality building. In order to build a high-quality building that's going to last 50 and 60 and 75 years, we need to build 11,000 square feet.
Why?
To make sure the cost is justified. And I know you can't look at a financial hardship. I completely get that. But the narrowness of this lot prevents us from adding more parking below or above.
And I would also add, too, one thing we didn't cover is a number of employees is going to be at that 28 to 30 range. That's going to be a max occupant.
And I don't mean to sound smart, but it probably will sound smart. But you think you only need 30 employees in 50 years? Because you don't know. I mean, I guess because we've approved a lot of things that, the owner of the property says, boy, I'm going to, and I don't have any reason to distrust you. I'm not saying that. But they'll say, I'm going to do this, I'm going to do that. And next thing you know, you approve what they're going to do, and then you see it on the market. And so it's just hard to know if a 50-year horizon is a long, long time. And it's hard to know, 50 years ago, think of what people would be saying about that property in Green Hills. I mean,
let's take your example, and let's assume it's sold in 30 years. It's going to be sold to someone who understands that they have 33 parking spaces and that they have to do the same thing that we're doing. I don't think the families are going to sell this, but what we are doing in similar projects across the city is we're putting in our leases actual number of employees that you could have in your space. We're seeing less parking because of this very issue.
I understand exactly what you're doing, and I know many families who have these kind of funds that they manage. They own the building. They're very particular about who else is in the building with them, and there's not a lot of traffic to anybody else. I know exactly what you're trying to do, and so to me, I believe you when you say this is going to be passed on and people are going to be managing the same assets and money out of this site, and they want a nice site. And it is a very small lot. I remember when that building burned, you really can't do a whole lot in there. So, and I understand the parking restraints.
To Mr. Harper's point about the queuing, in a traditional public office building, most people will come to work between 7:45 and 8:15. And they'll leave between 4:30 and 5:15. As a private office building, renting to friends and family members, you're going to have a lot of retirees, a lot of elderly business people who are going to come to the office at 9 o'clock and leave at 4. So the queuing doesn't cause an issue for us because people are going to leave and come at different times.
Well, help me. Yeah, I thought you said you had a 4,000 square foot rental spot and a 3,000 square foot rental spot. And who are you renting that to?
We're going to be selective and use leasing discipline to lease it to friends and family and strategic business partners. This is less a for-profit venture and more because the families want to own this long-term and build something really conducive and enhancing the neighborhood. They feel committed to doing that. We could have sold this lot, over the 6 years I've been working with the two families, we could have sold this lot 50 times for a lot more money, and the families feel committed to doing this.
So the letters of opposition that we got basically said that, and they claim to be neighbors, and they said that they basically they were limited by the rules that govern their property, and they abided by those rules. And why do you think that you should have I mean, there are lots of narrow lots in that area and lots of little bitty buildings and banks that you wonder how they got a bank on it.
Yeah,
and they all followed, and we haven't seen any of those, so they all seem to follow the codes and rules that apply to them.
You ask a great question. We've met with the neighbor. The letters all are emanating from one neighbor specifically. One of the letters from the Hampton Inn falls outside the allowed geography of the area. The second letter is from a Bedford Avenue neighbor who only has to have half the parking that we're required, so he's got a disadvantage. So the primary opposition is coming from the lot at the corner of Cleghorn and Abbott Martin. And they feel like that, we're going to have tenants who post their parking. And we've been next door. We've told them we're going to self-police this. And if one of our tenants uses their parking lot, we're going to ask them to move. And we're going to, it's not a 200,000 square foot Pinnacle high rise where you're not going to know who's in your building. And if somebody goes to park there, we'll ask them to move it.
Right. I mean, I guess.
And to your point again, the Cleghorn lot at the corner doesn't have the same challenges we do. It's got 2 access points. It doesn't have the same narrowness. We have the most narrow lot in all of Green Hills at 75 feet.
Yeah, I guess that I'm just still trying to figure out why this isn't self-imposed in this. If you built a 9,000 square foot building and you had, or how big would they have to build to have 32 parking spaces? 33. Or 33 do they have? I mean, I guess that's well, if the 33 that they squeezed onto the lot, meaning that 2 of them were granted a variance to allowed to be counted, what size building could they build? And that's what I'm saying. Why do you, if it's what?
99.
So you're losing 2,100 square feet. Why do you need that extra 2,100 square feet when you're renting 7,000 square feet? That's not part of the family business.
I mean, quite honestly, it was the math of the proposed building materials here. So if we go to a smaller building, which certainly, the board has the ability to tell us to do that, then the materials are going to have to change dramatically, and they won't be long-term in nature. And that's why we're here, is we've looked at adding parking below ground. It's astronomically expensive. And quite honestly, the narrowness of the lot makes it physically impossible to circulate into a garage. The same is true with a one-level structured garage. The narrowness of the lot makes it physically impossible to circulate into that garage.
No, I would like to commend the architects for putting what seems to be a very nice building on a very small lot. That's, you could have done a whole lot worse than. That's a very nice rendering given what they're going to use it for. And like I said, there's a lot of these kind of buildings quietly in Nashville. Most people just don't know about them. They don't have people that call on them in the public. And it's basically their family, friends, and cousins that rent space for them that do the exact same thing.
But they don't come here. I mean, they're following the code because we're not seeing. They don't see a lot of these on the agenda.
This isn't a Starbucks or an insurance agent that's going to have just people coming and going all the time.
Not now. But in 20 years from now, you don't.
I know people that have had family buildings that are still in the family 40 years later.
All right, but there's been no testimony about this specific. I mean, I don't know what family this is. I don't know any. I mean, and I will say it's a lovely building and it's nicely illustrated. I think you've done a nice job on it, and that really is independent of the concern I have, which we just spent a couple hours talking about on another project, is parking and do you meet the code, and in this That's important to me, and I really.
But,
like
you
I
know,
said,
when we talk about meeting the code, I know, yes, the building could be sold, but, you have to kind of look at what they're using it for and who's in there and the kind of building. And they're not building this building for, like I said, a restaurant or a State Farm insurance agent. It's just going to be this quiet little office that there's probably not even going to be any signage on the building, is there? Not one sign,
You
right?
see on the corner, it says 3835, which is the address of the building. That's going to be the...
You're not going to be driving by saying, oh, here's a podiatrist or here's a whatever. No, this building is just for the people that know what's in there. That's for them.
Mr. Ewing mentions podiatrist. We have specifically said we're not going to rent, and you may call it discriminatory, but we're not going to rent to doctors, dentists, those types of users.
Lawyers.
Because, well, no, lawyers don't have density issues, but doctors and dentists and podiatrists have way too many density issues, have way too many patients. They are open to the public. That's not what this building is about.
would you be willing to make a list of those types of functions and have that as part of the variance request, that you would not at any time rent to those?
We'd work with Joey and Bill and other staff members to make sure that we restrict it, because quite honestly, as long as one of the owners is on the top floor, he doesn't want to create a problem where he comes back to the office and doesn't have a parking spot.
He can fix that with a sign.
Well, except for the queuing problem. I mean, the queuing problem is only a problem when it's a problem, and when it's a problem, it's a public safety issue. There's a car trying to get in, has to stop short, straddling the sidewalk, bumpers out in the traffic, and that has nothing to do with the density of the parking spaces. There can only be one car in this whole property backing out of one of those first two spaces that causes a problem, and that's why we have the queuing. Because the car coming into the property that has to stop suddenly because somebody backs out in front of him will be off of the public street and not crossing the lane of traffic halfway. So,
and we accept that restriction. We know that's going to govern times of departure and times of arrival. We've talked about that with the owners, and they accept that constraint on the site.
Except what constraint?
The fact that, if you're going to park in those front spaces,
you can't back out?
That you may have to wait for someone to leave before you back out.
But it's the people coming in from the public street that don't have a place to queue.
Yeah, and so maybe your concern is the public street turning in.
Yeah, that's what the queue is for.
Right, and I think we would say is that, as Jeff covered earlier, it's not a traditional office where you maybe have a significant load coming in at 8 o'clock. You're going to have a very transitional period of in and out. So the likelihood that you would have somebody directly backing out or having a problem right when somebody else was coming in is a lot less than you would have in an 8 to 5 type of office situation.
It would be zero if you had the queuing. So I think that's what the queuing is for.
To me, let's just get down to what the BZA is for. We're here to fix things and grant variances if lots are odd shapes or narrow and you can't normally build but for something. And this is obviously a very desirable area of town. It should have some sort of structure on it. They've presented something that's very reasonable. They've made a reasonable plan, and I think they've met the requirements given that this is a tiny, Joey, show that overhead again from Green Hills. 75 feet. Look at the building where the community foundation is next door. That's very, as we know, we heard of, that's the average kind of house size width, 75 feet.
So if the community foundation wanted to build a 200,000 square foot office building on their space and they really couldn't do it for the same reasons this is, it's not an odd shaped lot.
Well, the community foundation building, they have more parking, and as you can see, they have a huge parking lot in the back, and so that's not the kind of case that comes in front of us saying we want a variance because we have a narrow lot. That's not a narrow lot.
The question I have is, it's just something that's kind of sticking with me because, I'd ask if it were 20% smaller, then it would be code compliant. And you said, well, you wouldn't build it as nicely, couldn't, the economics of it wouldn't work out. And all that to me says is that it's a revenue generating building, and because you need the 2,000 square feet to rent out, and somebody's renting out those 2,000 square feet, and whoever's renting them are parking. And so, it sounds like that on one hand, it's a quiet family-owned business that doesn't have a lot of traffic, but yet the reasons for not making it smaller are directly related to the occupancy of that building. And so there's a conflict there. And it's hard for me to reconcile, because what I'm hearing is not that this is just a small, quiet building, because those 2,000 square feet are critically important. And if they're critically important, they're going to be, 10 folks in that space parking somewhere in that extra 2,000 square feet. And that's what I'm struggling with.
And I think that's why we were trying to address your concern by saying that really the maximum functional occupancy of the building, as it's constructed and as you see the floor plans here, is going to be that 28 to 30 individuals. So there will even be a little bit of excess for the occasional visitor, even at a fully parked building. And that's, we hope we've addressed that question or that concern by noting that we don't anticipate having an occupancy that would support more than 33 spaces.
I think, Mr. Taylor, where we struggle, I agree with everything you said. This is one of those catch-22s in my business as a developer, how to build the right product on the site in the right submarket, and then make sure the parking works. But what we are continuing to see over and over again is this article, and that we're going to fewer cars and not more cars. That's the nature of this building. And so we are allowed by ordinance to build 11,156 gross square feet as a long-term investment for the families. We'd like to build the allowable FAR. To do that, we need a parking variance, plain and simple.
David, I know what you're saying, because we've been burned before on getting variances on things that didn't turn out like we were led to believe they would be. And I'm comfortable with supporting this if I have assurance from you all that you're building this building for your own use and the family use, because you're then going to know the constraints you're going to have with the parking situation.
And we acknowledge, Mr. King, that we have those constraints. And that we're not going to go out and lease it to dense users like doctors and dentists or people.
I feel comfortable with what he said. Like I said, I know a lot of these families, and believe me, it's not about necessarily making money off this building. They're going to rent these other spaces to some friends of theirs or some cousins of theirs that do the exact same thing. These are highly successful people. They might have had wealth for generations, and this is just a nice place for them. This is not your traditional kind of Green Hills office building. It's just not. And Nashville's a town that now has a lot of generations. They even mentioned the kids that this is for them. They're in grade school now. And one day, guess what? These kids will have an office in this same building.
I still worry about the queuing problem. A lot of times when we deal with, I think the last time actually we dealt with a queuing variance, there wasn't the proper queuing on the property, but it led into essentially a dedicated alley. So the queuing wasn't in the public street, and so I don't have a problem so much with reducing the number of parking, but the queuing distance.
Well, the last time if I remember correctly, Joey, that we gave a queuing variance was right down the street for Avenue Bank. It was from the drive-through that we basically, there wasn't another lane that goes all the way around. And the way they solved it, they had some sort of little stoplight thing that, is the lane over here being blocked, or can you go all the way through before you got back?
You may be right. I don't think I heard that case, but I know the one, and it was on 12th South, I believe. The problem was resolved with a dedicated right turn, because the way the parking lot worked, and so again, all the queuing was taken out of the traffic, and I'm the number of parking, and I'm willing to give. Well, we're getting into discussion time, but is there opposition that we need to hear from? I mean, we can close the case. Close the.
Do you have anything else to add?
Not at all.
I might add one thing to Mr. Harper's concern is that I understand where he's coming from with the public and the right-of-way queuing. We are very near the Abbott-Martin intersection, so I think you'd experience traffic already slowing down and braking in that area. You wouldn't have a high speed going through that area. Just that may address some of what he's asking.
In fact, if you look at the screen, this is a very strange intersection, because you've got the triangular feature of Cleghorn heading south, then it splits into two, and you can go right on Abbott Martin, or you can go straight to the traffic light at Abbott Martin. So there's already a slowing feature in front of our building anyway.
Okay, we'll close the public hearing. And
I know you have concerns, so I'll repeat this again. This is more common than you think. And when they say that this will be passed down the family, and these are people that they may not have to be in the office as much, or they might travel a lot, or, the parking lot may not be full most of the time. It's a good use for Green Hills. I don't think it really adds, I don't think it impacts the neighbors, really. And I think it's a good plan.
Yeah, I mean, my only thought on it is that, I've only been on this board 2 years, and I just haven't seen anybody else in narrow lots in Green Hills ask for this type of thing. And I know the type of building is common. It looks like a beautiful building. It's I have unfortunately had to vote for much less attractive, much, more projects that I really wish Nashville never had, but they met the requirements, and this is one that I think, boy, it would be a really nice thing. But I do think that it's a self-imposed hardship, because I think if it had said, well, let's do 9,000 square feet and have 32 parking spaces, then I can do that on the piece of property I have. But unfortunately, the property I've owned for 40 years, it just isn't big enough.
With someone that has a lot, and we've had these lots that were 50 feet wide, and they could build a 1,000 square foot house. You can say, well, why don't you just build a 1,000 square foot house? Well, no, they want a 2,000. That's a normal size. This is a normal size, particularly for Green Hills. And so I think this is a very reasonable request. The opposition is the neighbor, so he probably wants to either, buy it or just, I don't know. But, it's something that...
Yeah, and I get that it's a normal size, but those other buildings that are normal sizes aren't coming and asking for less parking than they're required to have by code, and that's the only...
But the second explanation is this isn't a Starbucks, this isn't an insurance salesman, this isn't something high-traffic building.
Today.
For me, it makes, like I said, I'm not going to say these families here, but there's so many families in Nashville that have exactly this, and it works. And they don't have any signs, and unless you know who's in there, you don't go in that building. And this is just one of them. It just happens to be in a very high-profile area.
And the width of the lot, David, does dictate and mandate, to me, a bit of a hardship, because parking spaces being 18 feet deep on two sides, it's 36. By the time you take the drive lane out, if they cut the building size down, the only place they're going to be able to reduce the parking is
in the back,
in the back or the front. So,
well, I mean, I get that, but there's no street parking anywhere nearby. There's no place for overflow, and I think and again, I mean, it sounds like there's support. I just want to go on record for saying that in a building that should have a greater capacity than 32 cars will provide, there's no place for any extra or excess folks. And the 33 cars that we are providing have some, I mean, we're squeezing them in to the point where, they have issues with Abbott Martin. Is that Abbott Martin? Whatever that road is. The road that they face.
Claycorn.
Yeah. What I'm thinking, not what I'm saying. So anyway, I mean, if no one else shares the concern like I do, then it's fine. I mean, make a motion and we'll go. But I do think it's a serious issue, and for the nature of what they want to use it for, I think it's probably okay. But a 50 or 60-year-old lifespan on a building, there's just a lot of questions down the road that says, no, if there's a reason they should have 38 parking spaces on that lot, there probably should.
And it still hasn't really been provided a decent response to the queuing issue. And I'm not opposed, again, to the reduction in the required parking. I'm actually okay with that. I get that, but it's the two parking spaces that are messing up the queuing that I have the problem with. So.
Would you be in favor of them not having those 2 parking spaces? So
Absolutely.
Sure.
You rather seven space variance than 5?
Well, I would prefer they lost the 600 square feet for those 2 spaces, as in terms of, meeting us more than halfway, because that's really what those 2 spaces cost them, is 600 square feet.
Mr. Harper, real quickly.
Well, can we
lose 4 spaces?
Hang on a second.
Not 2.
We're not.
The queuing issue has 4 spaces.
Okay.
2 on each side.
2 on each side.
How wide are the spaces?
They're 7.5 feet with a 4 foot. It's about 4 or 5 feet right now from the back of the sidewalk. So you would lose to get 20 feet from the right of way, which is what the code would state. You would actually lose 4 spaces.
You guys really are jamming the parking spaces in there. 7.5 feet.
They're compact, that's what they said. But,
So the Patriot's going to be driving
they're not
the tiny car.
This parking lot's going to be half empty at best all the time.
It's not, for me, it's not about the number of spaces, it's the distance from the street. I mean, it's irresponsible.
I'm going to say this to you because I do know I grew up in that area and spent a lot of time in that area. You are right that right where you all are located on that street, everybody's turning right. They're already making a move. There's not traffic going both directions on that one street. So people coming down there, David, would see that car coming out because you're only going to turn right in that one lane. Okay, there's no oncoming traffic coming down that lane.
It's not the car. It's not the car coming out, it's the car coming in.
That's what I'm trying to tell you.
It doesn't say the person backing up.
No, that's what I'm trying to say to you is that there's only one lane, one way coming down that street. Which is
given that these are just basically narrow, very compact spaces that are uncovered, people are going to be parking inside. This is almost throwaway space that the architects have designed for our benefit.
Then they can throw them away right now, and I'll be happy to vote for it.
No, but basically, these spaces probably won't get used much, if at all.
Yeah, so they should just eliminate them and only have to ask for one of the variances. It's a perfect solution, in my mind.
But they want to keep the size of the building.
I'll let them keep the square foot, just get rid of the spaces.
Are you okay giving them more space, more variance on spaces? That's what I just said.
May I make a suggestion to that? If that's your line of thinking, taking 2 of the compact off the front, put them at the back of the garage, and then you're net gaining a variance in 1 more space. So you're going to relocate 2 of them there. You've got 3 sitting at the back there. That area in the back, Andrew, that's uncovered too. Okay.
Yeah, essentially the building stops.
So what I'm saying is tack on 2 more to that row.
I don't think you can tack on 2 more on that row because you're outside of your drive aisle on that.
How important are 4 extra spaces in the front of this building for your use? I know you don't know what's going to happen in 10, 20, 50 years.
Oh, they said they did. That's the whole purpose of this variance, isn't it?
We don't know what's going to happen in 50 years. I think what we do know, at least from our experience over the past 30 years in the development business, is that in my mind, the code required parking gets changed in the next 10 years and goes down. Who would have thought we would have had smart cars and these little teeny tiny cars that we're seeing 15 years ago? Today, we wouldn't have guessed that. I think it makes the lot more workable to have the parking in the front. Right now, there is movement afoot from Mr. Rochford to try to redo this intersection and shut down the right turn lane. But in order to do that, that would take 12 months. And we don't want to wait 12 months to build the building.
Well, I think in the early 80s when we were coming out of the oil crisis and the crunch, who would have thought that everybody would have been driving Hummers and SUVs and big-ass Cadillacs? I mean, come on. We talk about we don't know what's going to happen in the future. We don't know what's going to happen in the future. And these are all tiny spaces. I mean, I've worked for, in my practice, I've worked for parking garage operators and owners and a lot of small spaces anyway. That's beside the point. I'm willing, apparently, we know who's going to park in this building, we understand how it's going to be used, and we don't really need these spaces, so why are we still talking about having these spaces,
I think they want the right for these spaces, just, who knows how the family will grow. But let me ask you a question about this. Do you have any plans for signage at all on the outside of the address on the outside of this building?
The current plan is to put 3835 on the outside of the building.
I mean, so there's not going to be any, because like I said, the people that are in this building, they're not wanting people from the public to say, hey, I'm here and come visit, you know? It's just a private office.
I mean, I get all that, and I get that it was family, but if I really didn't want people to know where I was, I probably wouldn't be building my building on one of the busiest intersections in Green Hills. I mean, I get the point, but it's a very visible building, even though it may not be a public building.
In that queuing distance, you could put in a gate, and you could use that queuing distance to wait for the gate to open. Then it's private, and you don't have to worry about it. Problem solved again.
I think, there may be more discussion or whatever, but I mean, like I said, I just kind of on principle have expressed my point of view, but it sounds like there's a lot of sympathy toward, and again, strictly principle, I think it's a lovely building, and I think it should be proud of the building if you build it like you.
But where I get,
shown us.
the big point in this building, as far as the BZA is concerned, this is a 75-foot wide lot in a commercial area. That's kind of narrow in some residential areas. This is what hardships are made of. 75-foot commercial lot.
I agree that it's a hardship for the number of spaces, but I still don't see how that affects the queue area. I mean, no one has yet made, in my opinion, a solid case that we don't need a queuing area.
If it were wider or bigger, we wouldn't be talking about a queue area because there'd be more spaces. And that's why we're talking about it, because
If it were wider, they'd have more floor area ratio, and they'd need more parking, and they would probably still be asking for the queue. I mean, come on.
But then the hardship wouldn't exist if it were wider. But the 75 feet. That's it.
But the queue runs perpendicular to the 75 square feet.
Well,
And that's just a fact. I mean,
Let's entertain a motion.
David, this one's yours.
I move that we grant the variance at 3835 Cleghorn Avenue, requesting a variance in parking and queuing, and to build the 11,156 square foot building based on the narrowness of the lot.
I'll second that motion.
Motion been made and seconded. Any further discussion? All in favor of the motion, say aye. Aye. Opposed? 4-2. Motion passes.
Motion carries on a vote of 4-2, and with that, the Board of Zoning Appeals is adjourned for today. Thank you.
Thank you.